Welcome to the Lincoln City Council meeting of Monday, 30 October 2017. Let us all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a period of silent meditation. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. In accordance with LB 898, a copy of the Open Meetings Act is posted at the back of the chamber. The order of business of the City Council is as follows. The clerk will call the items listed on the agenda under public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak on an item should come forward after the clerk reads that item. The applicant and those in favor should speak first, then those opposed. The applicant may then make one short rebuttal. Each speaker should begin by stating name, address, and whether you are speaking in favor or in opposition to the item. Testimony is limited to 5 minutes per speaker. After all public hearings, the council will vote on resolutions and items listed under third reading. On the second and last meetings of the month, immediately prior to adjournment, anyone may speak on an issue not on the agenda for that date nor planned for a future agenda. And as a reminder, please silence your electronic devices. Will the clerk please call the first item of business?
Yes, we do request those giving testimony to please clearly state your name and address and to sign in on the sign-in sheet laying on the podium. Our first item of business is our consent agenda, items 1 through 7.
Would anyone like to testify on these items? Is Rachel Zeng here? Very good. Please come forward. Greetings.
Good evening. Kim Taylor Riley with the Lincoln Commission on Human Rights, and Ms. Rachel Zeng is here as our proposed person to fill in for Mr. Benny Shobe's position because he got appointed to your council and left a vacancy on ours. So Ms. Zeng is here as the mayor's designate for that position, and she is here to answer any questions you might have of her.
Are there questions for Ms. Zeng?
Yeah, I don't have a question. I have a comment. I understand, or I do have a question, I guess. I understand you are a show choir supporter, so, which has absolutely nothing to do probably with the commission that you're going to be sitting on. But I appreciate that kind of enthusiasm, that someone that would devote themselves to that and take on another position like this. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, anyone else?
Yeah.
Carl?
Just your background of working in the medical field and a lot of things that you've done is really impressive. I don't, could we trade Benny, put Benny back there? And
yeah.
Benny will do anything to get out of work.
That would be a win for the city, but I'm going to hang on for a second.
Okay. Very good. Well, thank you very much for coming tonight.
Thanks, Carl.
Thank you for your willingness to serve.
Thank you.
Would anyone else like to testify on any of these items? Next item, please.
All right, if not, we can vote on these items. Item 1 was introduced by Eskridge.
So moved.
Second?
Moved by Carl, seconded by Jane. Discussion? Please call the roll.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Shobe?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. Items 2 through 5 were introduced by Gaylor Baird.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Leary and seconded by Carl. Discussion? Please call the roll.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Shobe?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. Next then are our public hearing liquor resolutions. We just have the one item, the manager application of Michelle Arisman for Greenfields at 7900 South 87th Street.
Good evening.
Elle, would you raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth as you verily believe it to be?
I do.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Michelle Erzman, and I'm the Director of Operations for Knudsen Ventures and oversee 4 of the businesses, including one of Greenfields Restaurant. So I'm here to apply for the position of manager for the Liquor Commission.
Okay, other questions? Cindy.
Thank you. Thanks for being here tonight.
Welcome.
I saw in your application that you hadn't completed your training, but it was scheduled for October 12th.
Yes,
which
I
is now
have
passed.
completed that,
So just
yes.
completed. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, anything else? Thank you for being here. Would anyone else like to testify on this item? Next item, please.
Mr. Chair, I would move approval of item 8.
Second.
Moved by John, seconded by Lyrian. Discussion? Please call the roll.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold? Yes. Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. Next then, our public hearing resolution, we just have the one item. Item 9, accepting the report of new and pending claims against the city and approving disposition of claims set forth for the period of October 1st through the 15th, 2017.
Welcome.
My name is Stephen Lose. I live at 2757 South 11th. I currently work at Lincoln Industries. I have served our great nation, our great state, our great community in the United States Army, the Army Nebraska National Guard. Matter of fact, roughly 20 years ago, if some of you recall, the great wind, ice, rainstorm that downed thousands of trees here in Lincoln, Nebraska, I was part of the team of the hundreds, if not thousands, of people working to clear our streets. The reason why I'm here is because in August of this last year, as all of you remember, there was a huge windstorm right here in Lincoln, Nebraska. And from that windstorm, at roughly at 11th and Van Dorn, a very large tree sitting on the city of Lincoln property between the sidewalk and street was uprooted in effect at its base and crashed across 11th Street. And from that crash, it landed on the top of my car, my 2003 Sebring. And in effect, to make a long story short, it crushed the top of it. And from that, I'm asking the Lincoln City Council to, I originally asked for $800 for my damages of, my car was totally wrecked, totaled by the tree, said property of the city of Lincoln. But I'm reducing that request to $700. It's probably not too often you get a reduction request, because basically I got a parking ticket from the city of Lincoln with my car being crushed. It really couldn't move too well. So I got a $10 parking ticket, so I had to sell what was remained of my car to a salvage company for about $100. So I'm asking the city council to reimburse me damages of $700. I had to buy a new used car, which is actually a year older. And from that, of course, the $10 parking ticket to the city of Lincoln, because my car was not going to move. But I also had to pay roughly $350 in taxes for my new used car and everything with that. I got a letter here from your lawyers, our lawyers in the city of Lincoln, and basically they talked about something about negligence. They did their due diligence in researching this. There's no doubt that the tree crashed across 11th Street and crushed my car. I was actually on 1011 News too. But the city forestry department did an excellent job in removing that said tree. But basically, they stated if there's no evidence of negligence, the mere occurrence of an incident resulting in claim damages in itself is not a sufficient basis upon which a claim may be pursued. That might be good from the law office, but for we common citizens, that don't make sense. I recall when I was in a criminal justice class in high school, right here in Lincoln, we had to go to observe some courtroom trials, and the defendant said out in court something about I was ignorant of the law. I had no idea that law existed. And the prosecutor immediately snapped, ignorance of the law is no excuse to break it. Well, I want to go along the same lines that ignorance of not knowing you're negligent is no excuse to run from the responsibilities of it. So once again, the fact is clear. The tree, which was owned by the city of Lincoln on city property, was uprooted at the base due to the windstorm and crashed into my car, and I'm seeking from $800 only $700 from the city of Lincoln, which I hope all of you will vote yay. In closing, as I know my 5 minutes is almost up, it's so much better that it was my car rather than somebody's home, or ultimately, so much worse, beyond any doubt, a human life that may have been injured by this tree. Thank you very much for your consideration, and please consider my plea.
Yes, Carl? Before you leave, just a few questions for you. So you indicated 11th and Van Dorn. On 11th Street or Van Dorn? Is this your residence?
No, actually, the tree was on city property between the sidewalk
right.
and the street at the home of 2745 South 11th Street, 2745 South 11th Street. And in effect, from the storm, the tree, this very large tree, was uprooted at the base. Mm-hmm. Through their due diligence, basically, the city law office did call the forestry department to do some research, from my understanding from their memo. They did state something, from my understanding, in effect, some interior rot within the tree, but in effect, the wind uprooted it from the base and pushed it across 11th Street.
So what I was trying to get at is, had you parked there before? Were you familiar with this tree? Had you ever observed anything wrong with the tree?
Well, once again, I observed nothing wrong with the tree per se. And the city of Lincoln has tens of thousands of fine trees, and I've always parked either on the east or west side of 11th Street by 11th and Van Dorn. But when the storm came up, it just uprooted the tree at the base, tipped it across 11th Street, blocking the whole street, and in effect, it crushed the top of my car. And once again, as I stated to the council, 1011 Strong was out there, and my car and me and we were on TV, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir, and thank you all for your consideration of my plea.
Thank you.
John?
If we have our city attorney come forward and explain a little bit more of the details.
Jeff Kirkpatrick, City Attorney. I would start out by saying I don't disagree with anything that Mr. Lowe said. Our records indicate that on August 20th, there was a bad storm. We removed approximately 92 city trees that were damaged because of that storm. The tree that he was talking about was one of those. Our records also indicate that we had no indication that there was anything wrong with the tree prior to being blown over. And so we had no reason to address that specific tree. And our recommendation that you deny this claim is based upon the fact that if we don't have knowledge of a defect, whether it's a pothole or a tree, the city has no ability to address that situation. And so we're not negligent, and by that definition, we're not liable for any of the resulting damages.
John?
And I understand this is consistent with the policy, include mailboxes and other things too. When is the city responsible, or is it supposed to wait for citizens all the time to either report, or, as Mr. Lowe said, the tree just fell on him, on his car?
Well, in a situation where a tree blows over, where a apparently large, healthy tree blows over, it's hard to imagine how we would have knowledge that a storm's going to come up and a healthy tree is going to blow over and do damage. Certainly, if we're out trimming trees like we do on a daily basis, and we see a tree that has some damage, it has a branch broken off or is partially dead, and we have knowledge of that, I think we have some liability. And certainly, just like potholes, the city receives calls on a daily basis about trees that are in need of, that look like they're sick or dying and they need to be fixed. I know in my neighborhood, last spring, there was a tree that looked like it was dying, and I called, I ran into Lynn Johnson. I said, on I think it was 72nd Street, there's this tree, and it looks to me like it's dying, and you got to take a look at that. And we get a lot of citizens that make those calls, that notify us, and we have an obligation then to go out and take a look at the situation, and if you've got a dangerous tree, to take it down. So our liability kicks in when we have knowledge.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Would anyone else like to testify on this item?
Hi there, my name is Chris Bland. I'm at 1561 South Cotner Boulevard, and I have some pictures and for everybody. Oh, sorry. And I have my neighbor Gloria Housel as well. Last year I called City Parks and Recreation Forest Division, spoke to Ann to complain about a tree in front of our house. It's in the city right away and right in front of 1561 South Cotner. The tree had several large limbs that were dead and needed to be trimmed. My neighbor Gloria has complained about the tree for 5 years or so, and she's can testify that no one's done anything about the tree in the 16 years or so that she's been there. Nobody came and trimmed the tree. Fast forward to Sunday, August 20th, the storm, the top of the tree, the dead limbs fell, knocking out some other limbs, and they landed across my truck. I contacted the city, spoke to, Elizabeth Elliott with the city attorney's office. They denied my claim at first. I came to city council beginning, I think it was like 4 weeks ago, and spoke to you guys about it, and they referred back to the city attorney, asked some questions that he needed to answer. Calling back the 4th of October, I placed another call to Elizabeth Elliott. She said the claim would be denied again. She changed the story again, so the tree was not trimmed and it was cut down due to the storm damage. When we originally talked to Ms. Elliott about it, she said that they trimmed the tree, which they didn't. And then when I told her that they would be liable for it, because if it fell and hurt somebody or anybody else, the next day we got a notification that they were cutting the tree down, and 4 days later the tree was gone. The pictures I gave you, the first picture is dead limbs in this picture, dead limbs right in front of the tree, clearly not trimmed, and the whole top of the tree fell. The second page, there's a branch that's kind of dead. That's what fell originally and landed on my truck. And the darker picture, you can see the rotted wood from the limbs. And the third page is the tree. And that's all I have, really.
Okay. Other questions for Mr. Bland? Miriam?
Thank you.
Thank you.
You mentioned that you had reported the tree. Can you explain through what methods? Was it phone call, email? Do you have any documentation of
when
those?
You call the Parks and, well, if you go to the website, they ask you if it's real bad to call. So we called, and I spoke to an Ann at the Parks and Rec department.
Okay. And when? No, I'm looking at your.
It was last year. Let's see. I want to say about September.
Thank you.
Thank you. And this is my neighbor, Gloria.
John?
Excuse me, sir.
Yes. Sorry.
When were these pictures taken? For example, this one of the tree?
That was after when the storm happened the next day. The first picture that you see was taken last year around September.
This one?
No, that was after the storm.
So approximately when would this have been taken?
Say August the 23rd, maybe, this year.
Other questions? I have a question. So
Yes.
basically what you're telling us is that this tree has been a problem tree in your mind, and you or your neighbor has reported this to the city on more than one occasion prior to the 20th of August storm.
Yes,
Is that
sir.
correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Other questions?
Yeah.
Carl?
And what was the amount of your damage?
$14,000.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Do we want to hold our questions till all of them? Can we ask individually?
Well, I'm going to ask individually, I think.
Okay. Oh, you're going to respond? No, that's fine. Well, that's on this claim?
Yes.
Okay, do that. Yeah, and then
But she had.
I am looking at you. Come on up. So let me just preface this by saying, we've been on the council for a while, certainly have seen a number of these things, and according to my understanding, state law says if the city has no knowledge before the fact of a problem, then the city is not liable. But this appears to be a case where we've got two people saying the city's been notified on more than one occasion that this tree in particular is a problem, and then it caused damage. What was the basis for denial of this claim?
Well, we looked at our records and we found that we did receive a call about this tree in the summer of 2016, and we came out on July 21st of 2016 and removed a branch that was a problem. And we looked through our records and didn't find any other calls for this address since July of 2016. And that was the basis of our recommendation in early October that it be denied. And you might recall that in early October, when Mr. Bland was here, he said that the tree had been removed. And I was unable to answer a question as to why it was removed. Since then, of course, we checked with the forestry, and they said we removed it because when a portion of the tree broke off in the August 20th storm, that it damaged the trunk of the tree so badly it was going to die, and so they came out and removed it because it was so badly damaged in the storm.
Okay. Other questions? Carl?
So Jeff, we heard from Mr. Bland that they called in September of 2016, and you indicated that in July, so before they called, that the city was there.
Right, and I think that was the same discrepancy back when we appeared before you in October. I would tell you that our records indicate we received a call in July, and we came out in July and cut it. I don't know if he has records that show when he made the call, if he's going off of memory. And if he's going off of memory, I would suggest that perhaps the more reliable indication of what month it would be the city records that are recorded both when we received the call, complained about the tree, and also the records indicating when we went out to that address.
Okay.
John?
Yep, I've got two questions. I had one follow-up with Mr. Bland, if I could. If you had a question for you again on the photo you showed me. So the tree was removed.
Yes.
What's happened to the sidewalk since then?
Nothing. It's still damaged.
Okay, now I'd like to talk to Ms. Esposito, please.
Okay. Have a seat, miss. Have a seat.
Hi there. Mickey Esposito, Director of Public Works and Utilities.
Yeah. As I recall, we've inventoried all of our sidewalks in recent years to understand which need to be brought into compliance with the ADA and other standards. And I'm kind of curious how the different departments relate here. There was a report of this. It was trimmed in 2016, and then here was the windstorm in August damage, and the tree was removed. Does forestry or anyone let you know that, or wouldn't you have had on your list from the inventory that there's a sidewalk, this panel that's completely out of or substantially out of compliance?
So from the looks of this, and I would have to, have an inspector go out and measure it. This may or may not be in the inventory. It may or may not be part of our asset management system as an identified non-prioritized or prioritized repair. So I would have to ask if this has been a sidewalk that was called in for a request for inspection. And then the second, once was inspected, they would determine if it was above 2 inches. 2 inches or greater is a priority repair for purposes of fixes. But anything less than that is a non-prioritized repair.
Don't I recall that we've had some substantial amounts used to remedy sidewalks, and that even if you had the high priority, that the next tier should be handled? And also you said if it had been inventoried. I thought we did every sidewalk in the city.
We don't inventory the entire city for sidewalks. We are a complaint basis program, just like potholes. And so when we receive a request to inspect a sidewalk to determine whether it deserves a repair, then we get out there and inspect. So I would have to see if this is in our that's the point in time that it's part of the grand inventory, so it's complaint driven. I don't know if this sidewalk is part of that inventory or not.
Gosh, I just still recall in the last couple of years, and I know I'm graying here, but that there was an inventory of everything, because you came up then with figures to start repairing, and you came up with a $30–40 million whatever liability. I don't remember the exact amounts.
Okay.
But it was a substantial amount, saying we got all these sidewalks to do, and so the mayor and the council prioritized getting these done. But
okay,
I
know
was
what you're
sure
talking.
We had somebody.
I have an answer for you if you want it. Okay.
Yes.
That was based on a backlog of sidewalk repair requests. If you recall, we devoted $4 million to getting a complete eradication of a backlog of requests that existed because we didn't have enough sidewalk funds to support those repair requests. So you recall that there were about 1,500 priority repairs. Priority repairs are anything over 2 inches or greater in grade separation. There were 1,500 of those that existed on a backlog because of lack of funding. And then there was a list of 10,000 non-priority repairs that were also part of that list because there was such a lack of funding. And so we devoted $4 million, I believe in 2015, for to eradicate that list of repairs.
I thought we spent $1.5 million last year, but well,
yeah. That's correct. There's about $1.5 million in the CIP now going forward, but it's still a complaint. It's complaint driven.
So when, just thinking of department versus department, so forestry goes out and under Parks and Rec and fixes this, would they not, I mean, they're right there, they take the tree out, wouldn't they observe that, and wouldn't they report to you that, gee, Public Works, we've got a difficult sidewalk here?
Sometimes they do, and that may be the case. I just don't know. I can check on this location to see if it's part of
I don't know if Mr. Johnson's here, Lynn Johnson, director, but it would seem like, again, having between our departments, communications would sure help a number of things. We've had potholes that have existed.
And that happens a lot. Yeah, departments work together all the time on things, and
I just like
it
to
may
see
be
a
the case
system where
here.
we just don't say, gee, citizen, you didn't report it to us, when we've got trucks out everywhere, and here we removed a tree right there, and it was trimmed in 2016 and nothing was done. So I know it's not dealing with the tree itself, but it seems like we ought to have the eyes and ears of all of our employees helping one another.
I agree, and that happens. I'll check on where this sidewalk is.
Check on that inventory too. I really thought we'd done an exhaustive study.
Lyrian, you had a question?
No, well, for Jeff.
Okay, for Jeff. Come on back up, Jeff.
And if I can address the sidewalk, it appears to me from my file that the original complaint back in 2016 was about the sidewalk, because the roots were pushing up, and you can see when you look at the picture of the sidewalk that it appears that it's the roots of the tree that are pushing up the sidewalk and causing the slight raise that is there. And it may be that Public Works came out and inspected and didn't do anything because it's not the 2 inches that they use as a standard.
In the letter we received this evening, it states that one of the members of your office said that there was not a tree, that the tree was not trimmed in 2016. So is that, which is it?
I think that we
Do you
clearly.
have definitive
Our
documentation of the
research
tree
showed
trimming?
that the tree was trimmed on July 21st of 2016.
Is there any reason why Ms. Elliott would have told them otherwise?
I think there was not. I know that Mr. Bland called her on a number of occasions, so it's possible that he misunderstood what she said on one of those occasions.
In the picture, the big picture of the tree, there's apparently a year later, there's obviously dead branches there.
Well, it wouldn't be unusual to have some die back between 1 year and the next for otherwise healthy tree. Certainly you can drive around town and you're going to see trees that have some dead branches in them. Depends on how big they are and how serious they are, whether they need to be addressed.
Okay. Any other questions for?
Just to drill down a little bit more on the tree trimming, you mentioned they trimmed a branch. Were you just,
Well,
is
they
that, are you specific, or they really just come out and trim one branch, or do they do an assessment on a tree and
Well, the
trim
phrase
it
they
as needed?
use is a hanger. It's the forestry term they use. So I think when you come out and you see a dead branch that's of size, if you can safely remove that branch, you do that. You don't take the tree down
Sure.
if it otherwise appears to be healthy.
But
And
they do a complete assessment. I mean, they wouldn't just take the one that's hanging, they would look for other weak points as well, or?
Right, and I think if they had a tree that was significantly weakened or damaged, they'd take the whole tree down. So you had an inspection in July of 2016, and the assessment was, you've got a branch that we need to take down, which they did, but the tree otherwise appears to be healthy.
And do you have any other documentation of other complaints after that about this tree?
No, we checked our records, and at least from Forestry's perspective, they didn't have any record of any calls after July of 2016 indicating any problem with this tree.
Cindy.
Thank you. Okay, so I think I'm hearing two different things, but I'm not sure. So, and originally, I thought I heard that we got a call about the tree in July of 2016 and went out and trimmed it. And then just a few minutes ago, you said actually the call was about the sidewalk. So is there no record at the city of a call about the tree?
Well, let's see. I can read you what the communication we received was. I do want to note, let's see, I defer to Janet on the records of his call in 2016. I do want to note that his stated concern was for a lifted sidewalk due to tree root issues, and talks about the need for sidewalk repairs. So the problem with the tree was the roots were pushing the sidewalk up. So the forestry is going to come out and take a look and see if the tree has to be removed because the roots are a problem. When they came out and took a look at the tree, I don't know that the sidewalk was a huge problem at that point, but they did see the dead branch, so they removed it at that time.
Thank you.
Question?
Larian?
The letter we received tonight also says that Ms. Housel, Mr. Bland's neighbor, called repeatedly about this tree maybe prior to 2016. Do you have records of that? And was there any city action taken to address her calls?
We do not have, well, I don't think we would have looked prior to 2016 because we know in 2016 we had a tree that was generally healthy and had one branch that needed to be removed. So any notification we would have received prior to July of 2016 would have, I mean, if it indicated it was anything other than a healthy tree, it would have been an error, other than that one branch. So we had no reason to look for citizen calls prior to July of 2016.
Who did the branch removal? Was it Public Works' sidewalk team, or was it
was
Parks and
forestry.
Rec? It was forestry.
Yes.
John?
Mr. Kirkpatrick, you just said that you had no reason to look before 2016 since they took the branch, but it sounds like you have some other communications in that file, or were there other communications before 2016?
I don't have any record of those. We had no reason to look before 2016. The damage was caused in 2017. So the question was, did we have any notice prior to August 20th of 2017 that we had a tree that possibly was defective? Now we know on July 21st of 2016, we had someone that works for the forestry department, a professional, came out and not only examined the tree, but took down a dangerous branch. And so we know on July 21st of 2016 that the tree was healthy and apparently not a safety defect. And so if we were checking to see if we had any notice of this tree being defective, we would start on July 21st and go forward.
Okay, other questions?
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Bland, would you care to take a brief rebuttal?
Yeah, my neighbor to speak first, and then I'll.
I'm Gloria Housel. I live at 1557 South Cotner, and I had called the park department about the tree probably 5 years before that because there was a lot of dead up in the tree, and they just kind of brushed it off, and the guy said, well, we can't get clear up in those trees and cut the dead out. But when there would be a lot of rain or a lot of wind, there was a lot of little limbs that came down, and I'd pick them up and put them on the curb for them so that they'd get hauled away. And I was home most of the time in 15 years because my mother was there and I was her caregiver, and so I never saw anybody do anything to that tree.
Okay, questions? Thank you, ma'am.
And, the only rebuttal I have was this picture here was taken September of last year, and there's clearly dead branches on the front of the tree. And this would be after they supposedly trimmed.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak on this item? Come forward, please.
Hi there. My name is Ann Ramju. I live at 3130 Mayflower. We just purchased the home and closed on May 30th of this year. A couple weeks prior to that, we have a big city oak tree in the front yard. A couple weeks prior to that, I had called asking for removal. I'd had a friend of mine, an arborist friend of mine, say that it was leaning so badly because of prior overcrowding, and there were many dead limbs up in the tree. So I got a notice that said they'll come and trim it. And I'd called back and urged for removal of the tree. Here again on August 20th. We awoke at about 1:32 to the sound of branches falling on both of our vehicles. August 21st, my husband had cleared stuff away, so the car was drivable. He'd cleared stuff away so that I could get my daughter to preschool. And we came out, and thankfully this rogue branch fell on the other side of the car. I phoned Chris Connolly that day and said, I need some help. How do I get this tree out of my yard? It's now proven to be a hazard. And it scares me. On August 22nd, I got a call from Bob Wyrick. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that correctly. Okay. That the tree was scheduled for removal and that he would send a crew out today to make it safe. I've been waiting since May for something to be done with this tree. I understand 60 to 90 days for trimming, or now I have another 60 to 90 days for removal. I just think that this sure should have maybe been looked at a little more closely in the first place, and maybe we wouldn't have had these damages to our vehicles.
Okay, questions for Ms. Romju? Cindy?
Thank you. So has the tree been removed?
No, it has a number on it now, but no, it hasn't been removed yet.
Thank you.
Lyrian?
Could you run through the timeline again for us, Ms. Ramju? And
Yeah. We closed on our home on May 30th, and it was probably a couple weeks prior to that I had my friend over, and he's like, you should call somebody about the tree. So I called about the tree. And then I got one of their little notices in the mailbox, which they don't come with dates, which should be kind of nice. But it will be trimmed. We'll ask supervisor to reinspect for removal. We'll schedule trim.
what's the date on that?
They don't date them.
When did you receive it, roughly?
Oh, I would say beginning of June, mid-June, maybe.
Okay.
First couple of weeks in June. So it was a fairly prompt, I thought, ticket. I was encouraged.
So you've made a complaint prior to that to the city?
Yeah.
Sometime in the first few weeks of June after you closed on the home?
I'd called about the tree prior to closing.
Prior
on
to
the home.
closing, okay.
Yeah, prior to May 30th.
Okay.
And Bob will tell you that I've called quite a few times about the tree. I don't know if there's anybody here from forestry, but.
And your claim that was denied is about damages to your vehicles as a result of fallen tree branches from this tree?
Yes, yes.
And that was in August that the damage happened?
Yes, it was the 20th.
Okay. Well, we'll need to hear from our city attorney about this one too, I suppose. Okay, thank you.
So.
Jeff, could you come up and speak to this one? So she has said that she'd made the call, reported it.
Yes,
Has been
and this is a
had
picture of the tree in
communication.
question, which is a pretty healthy tree. And she did make a number of calls, and we have a record of the calls that she made. And Bob Wyrick did go out, community forester, on June 3rd, and then again on June 13th to inspect this tree. And he did say that there was a small hanger, a dead branch that was in the tree, and that it needed to be trimmed. But there was essentially a healthy tree, and it was not a danger and did not need to be removed. And that from his perspective as a forester, there was damage on August 20th, but it was a strong wind, and there were a lot of branches that were down. And so from his conclusion as a forester, this was not a diseased tree that did not need to be taken down, and that's why we denied the claim.
But just to clarify what you said, he inspected in June 3rd and 13th, determined that the tree did need trimming. Did the tree get trimming?
I don't know that it has, but it was a very small branch, and the branch that came down and caused the damage was not a dead branch, but a live branch.
But doesn't this seem like, it seems like the first time we've had a claim come forward where the city had knowledge of a tree needing trimming, a falling branch did damage property. We had noticed, we hadn't taken action, even if
Well,
we didn't think
we did take action. We came out and we actually inspected the tree twice.
But
And so you
inspection
could-
is different than addressing the damage, or addressing the problem.
Well, it is addressing whether or not there's a defect or not. When you go out and you look at it and you say, well, there's no defect, I mean, and you can see this tree is a healthy tree. And so we don't have the resources to go down and cut down every healthy tree where there's got a few dead branches.
I'm not suggesting we should have cut it down, but if it needed trimming and it didn't get it, and she had damage to a vehicle from a fallen branch, I'm inclined to feel like this is the first time I've heard of a case like this where we had knowledge and didn't take action as a city, and therefore should pay her claim. That's where I'm going with this.
Okay. Carl?
Yeah. Jeff, do you know the date of that picture?
I do not. I don't have that in the file.
Which one is it?
Is that your picture?
Okay, John, then Benny?
While you're looking, maybe in the future, we should have city staff or city departments date things, especially cards going out and so forth, so we know it's.
8/23.
Now, the,
So this was submitted by Ms. Ramju after the August 20th storm.
okay, and so in her testimony, Ms. Ramju talked about the tree leaning and that her friend, and before she closed the home, even thought there was concern. Now, I couldn't tell from that photo and that angle if it's leaning or not.
Looks like it's leaning.
Well, I think it's difficult to tell from the angle whether it's leaning or not. All I can tell you is that the city forester went out and inspected it twice and didn't, in his opinion, his professional opinion, didn't think that it was so dangerous that it needed to be removed. We did receive a number of calls from Ms. Ramju. She was clearly concerned about this tree, and so we did give her a ticket to allow her, at her own expense, to remove this city tree, but she chose not to.
Okay, Benny?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Jeff, I appreciate what you're saying, and Ms. Ramju, I appreciate your comments. I'm a little concerned about how we determine it to be a healthy tree. Do we bang on it with a hammer? Do we drill a hole? How does can you give me some overview on how forester determines it's healthy?
Well, they make a visual inspection. Do you have a lot of dead branches? Do you have signs of rot or a hollow middle? I mean, sometimes you can tell when a tree is hollowed out in the middle. A lot of times you can't, and you don't know it's got that hollow, rotten core until it falls over. And so, I mean, if you've got some dead branches, if you've got part of the tree or half the tree has dead branches, then you know you've got a serious problem. If it was leaning over to such an extent where you thought, well, strong wind and it's going to blow that over, that would be a sign of a defect.
And these inspections are done by trained foresters, right?
Yes.
Certified.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Other questions, John?
Would it be possible, maybe on these two claims, I don't know if there are any other tree claims, that we hold them over and have the forestry here? It's just concerning. And, you talk about looking healthy. I remember growing up, we had an apple tree that my dad wanted to get rid of, so he poisoned it with everything in the world. It came out with apples for the first time the next season. Then it died. And so sometimes, a struggling tree is going to produce, this kind of its last hurrah. Yeah. First time we had apples. So, but he gave it everything. So, it was in our yard. So it was okay.
I think given the, I think I did tell you a while back that we were going to see a lot of these tree claims. I mean, we had 92 trees, city trees down because of that storm. And so maybe it would be appropriate to have someone from forestry come in and talk not only about these specific trees, but also about trees in general and how they make those inspections and how we make a determination on what's taken down and what isn't, and even what they consider a hanger to be.
Now, would it be fair to say, too, under homeowners insurance, that something like this should be covered, even though it's on the city right-of-way, since it's the responsibility of the homeowner generally?
I think that, I'm not going to speak to that. I don't know.
Okay. Thank you very much. Are there other claims? You can have a quick rebuttal, sure. Just don't say anything until you get up to the microphone. That way we can hear you.
I do have a photo of where the branch broke off, and it is clearly hollow and dead. You could come by tomorrow and, there's a lot of dead branches in that tree. And on there, by Bob sending someone out on the 23rd to trim the tree and, in his words, make it safe, leads me to believe that the tree is not safe. It is a hazard. And on their little ticket here, this is the one that I got prior to the storm, granted. The tree adjacent to your property is healthy and will not be removed, as we only authorize removal of dead, dying, deteriorating, damaged, diseased, and/or hazardous trees. And so,
Okay.
Thank
you
you.
very much. All right. Anyone else testifying on this item? Next item, please.
All right, we'll go on to our public hearing ordinances second reading. Item 10, annexation 17014, annexing approximately 2.72 acres of property generally located at 5600 West Adams Street.
Does someone want to talk about this?
I'm not very, my name is Kam Nang, and I represent the Nebraska Theravada Buddhist Association, and we bought that area to build a temple or monastery in that area. And since that area is out of the city limit, we need to have a water and sewer. So we need to have that annexation, and somebody from the department or city suggests I apply for it, and that's why I did.
Okay. Any questions?
A staff question.
Okay. Thank you very much.
So I'm done.
You can sit down. Thank you.
David Carey with the City Planning Department.
So, extending water and sewer service to serve this facility, how's that paid for?
Yes, so this is a situation where we have the property is contiguous with the city limits and therefore meets that requirement for us for annexation. It also is within proximity of existing water and sewer tappable lines, so that what would happen is that the property owner would pay for those extensions to get that service on the property, but that is typical of what we'd expect for that type of situation where they need to get that service on the property to do the project that they want to do.
Okay. So, see, it's Northwest 56th and West Adams, so there's service at that corner, so it's just a matter of
Correct.
Of getting it onto the property itself.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
John?
And would I be correct assuming that the service included both water supply and sanitary sewers?
Yes. And I would add that West Adams, that segment of West Adams Road is already in the city limits, so that's a segment that's, the road portion of this discussion has already been taken care of.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Would anyone else like to testify on this item? Next item, please.
All right, next is item 11, annexation 17015, annexing approximately 152 acres of property generally located between 1st and 14th Streets on both sides of Fletcher Avenue.
Good evening, David Carey with the Planning Department. I'm going to kick this off very quickly here and allow staff Paul Barnes from our Planning Department, as well as Andrew Theroff. We have Assistant Chief Pat Boer here as well from Lincoln Fire and Rescue. We have brought this forward through the Planning Commission, being approved by the Planning Commission to move forward for your consideration for action for annexation. I would add that what we've done is we've taken the process and followed the policies that are established for this type of annexation to move forward for your action at this time. And I think I would just hand it off to Paul Barnes at this point so that we can move forward with the discussion. Thank you.
Greetings, Paul.
Good evening, Paul Barnes, the Planning Department. So we have two annexations that we're going to be looking at this evening. Both are acreage subdivision areas. I'm going to take this opportunity to give us a little background information on how we got to where we are today. In the mid-1990s, the City Council at that time had asked the Planning Department to look into and put together an annexation study process. We know that Lincoln is a growing community. We've had annual growth in the range of 3,000 to 4,000 people every year, with a lot of that growth happening on the edge of the city. So our city boundaries continue to grow and expand to accommodate that increase in population. We haven't done a study since 2008, so that's the last time that this was looked at as a package of city-initiated annexations. So where we start with this topic is to look at the state statute. And the state statutes define annexation authority differently depending on class of city. Lincoln is a primary class city, and this statute applies to us, which says that the city council may by ordinance at any time include lands within the city limits that are contiguous, adjacent lands, streets or highways, and in any distance and direction as you deem proper. Here are the kind of three main bullet points as reasons for why we do city annexations, city-initiated annexations. One being the equity for all taxpayers. These areas that you'll see today have frontage, in many cases, on city streets. So they're using city streets that have been improved or are paid for and maintained with city taxpayer dollars. We're also looking at areas to clarify the service for maintenance of those facilities, but also for emergency services, and Andrew can point those out. And then we're also supporting orderly and efficient growth of our community. As we continue to expand our boundaries to provide for that additional growth, we're making investments in that too. And we want to make sure that those investments are efficient and we are having orderly growth. So these next few slides I'm going to show you are direct quotes from our city-county comprehensive plan, where we have developed this annexation policy. And it's been developed through that public process from the mid-1990s. So what we have here are a couple of points that apply to these specific areas. That the character of existing residential areas should be respected as much as possible during annexation. Both of these areas, again, are residential in use. We're not proposing additional zoning changes. So the character of these areas should remain as they are. But with these acreage areas, we also recognize that we need to take additional steps and that we should be having open discussions with these owners. We did publish a draft study in July of 2019. Excuse me, July 19th. Sorry about that. So that was a draft study. We did have some background work that went on with that, but the draft was published July 19. Shortly after that, we sent out notices to affected property owners that were recommended out of that study for annexation. They received those letters in late July or early August. We then had our, in conjunction with this, a website developed which published all of our materials, including meeting materials that we presented at our 4 neighborhood meetings. So we did hold 4 neighborhood meetings at the end of August, which were open to the public. Anyone from the public could have attended. We did focus those in the areas, though, of the proposed annexation. And then did notify people that if this does proceed and move forward, we'd be at City Council in October through December. Just a couple more of these points here from our comprehensive plan. Again, in general, many of these aspects of acreages should remain the same. The zoning, whether they have covenants or not, you know, they're not going to be required to subdivide further, although if they would like to, we would sure talk to them about that. But this annexation alone is not going to cause that. We do recognize that there are some additional costs, though, that there's the city levy that is an additional tax. We do take that under consideration with this process, and if these areas are approved for annexation by the City Council, the additional tax would not be paid for, would not be paid by the owner until the year 2019. So that levy starts in 2018, but since that's in arrears, that's not paid until 2019. And then lastly, on this text, this is kind of wrapping up the state statute, that policy that was developed. We do recognize that land should be looked at adjacent to the city or contiguous that's in priorities A and B. That area that should be looked at is generally urban in character, meaning that not only in land use, not only is it farmed, but its proximity to the urbanized area, the proximity to infrastructure and utilities and roads that have been built and in place, that defines its urban character. So these areas are not rural in character, they're not remote or otherwise removed from the city. They are contiguous on multiple sides and do have that urban character.
Can I ask you a clarifying
Yes.
question? So are you saying that even if an area is agricultural, because some of these will still maintain that zoning, even if it's farmed, it's the proximity to city and services and infrastructure that makes it urban in character? Is that how you're defining it?
Right.
It's not that it looks urban necessarily.
Well, the definition has actually been through the Supreme Court on several cases, and it's not based solely on land use. So if you have an ag property that's farming, it could be contiguous to the city and on an arterial road with water and sewer in that road. And although it's farmland, it's considered urban in character because of its surroundings and context, not solely in land use.
Okay.
So these are the specific criteria that we pull out from the comprehensive plan when looking at this study. Looking at land in Tier 1, priorities A and B, looking at land that's engulfed by city limits, land that's contiguous to the city limits in an urban zoning, and land contiguous to city limits in ag zoning where basic infrastructure is in place or planned and is urban in character. So that last point really does apply to these two areas that you're going to be looking at tonight. After going through that study, we found that all of these areas in the brown met at least one of those 4 criteria. That's a very ambitious, thousands of acres annexation package. We thought that we'd like to drill that down to something that's a little more palatable, looking at more of those clear-cut areas that are adjacent to existing utilities, can't easily be served, and these are the 8 sub-areas that we had drilled down to. So this evening, we'll be looking at sub-area A and then sub-area C. This first item is sub-area A. As David had said, the Planning Commission did review and recommend this. They had a unanimous vote for this first area for annexation.
Andrew Theroff, planning staff. I'll just quickly walk through some of the details of this particular annexation. This is between 1st and 14th Street along Fletcher, generally, north of the interstate. It includes 152 acres, 24 dwelling units, 2 churches, and a tree farm. It also brings in portions of Fletcher and the interstate that are county today. So just to step back and explain this map. The white area is city today, and the blue is the proposed annexation. So you can see, going along Fletcher, it's city, county, city, county, city again. Interstate as well, city on both sides, and then non-city jurisdiction for this little stretch. To zoom out a little bit, just to get the context of where we are, we have Fallbrook just to the northwest. We have Heartland's Garden Valley just to the north, Lynx Apartments, and then, of course, all of the surrounding urban development on the east and south sides. This area is already in the LPS district, so they'll, of course, remain in LPS upon annexation. They're within the jurisdiction of Raymond Fire and Rescue, so that would switch to LFR upon annexation, and in just a couple minutes, Pat can talk about that. I also want to address some of the big questions we've got with these annexations over the last few weeks. Probably the biggest one is, what's the benefit I get from being annexed? I'm a property owner that's proposed for annexation. What am I getting out of this? Our answer to that is the properties that we're looking at today already have a very big benefit from their location. If we look at this site, it's hard to really go anywhere without driving on city streets. Most of these properties actually have a driveway on existing city streets. All these properties along Fletcher, properties along 14th, properties along 7th. 14th is actually an improved arterial with a trail. So I think looking at this, it's safe to assume that these residents are using streets, maybe things like parks, trails, at the exact same rate as any of the other surrounding residents that are in the city today. So upon annexation, these residents will be paying the same taxes as all of the surrounding residents. Another question that's come up a lot is water and sewer. And we've talked about this before. I just want to clarify again, the city typically doesn't pay for local water and sewer lines. Sewer, in this case, sewer and water would be at the property owner's request and paid for via assessment districts. This is just how the city does business. If we look at new developments, the local sewer, water lines, local urban roads, developer pays for those, and then those are passed on to the property owners when they purchase their lots. So everyone's paying for these services. It's just usually don't notice because it's part of your lot fee when you purchase your lot. So this would be the same situation for these residents. The one difference would be that they've already paid for the lot, so they'd be paying for it via an assessment district. Particular this area, we have heard from a few residents whose wells have gone bad. They don't have suitable drinking water. So it's possible, maybe even likely, that we would have a water assessment district somewhat soon after annexation. This map shows the existing hydrants. We can see there's quite a bit of hydrants actually in this area already, along most of Fletcher here and then along 14th Street. And that leads us into our fire discussion, which I'll leave to Pat.
We'll ask questions.
Yeah, I just had a question. Because you talked about the special assessment district or whatever, how many property owners would any kind of assessment be spread across in this particular annexation request?
It would be the benefiting properties, so it just depends on essentially where the lines would go. So if we see here, there's actually water here that could be tapped. So say someone requests water, these residents probably wouldn't be subject to any sort of assessment district. They already have water.
Okay.
But then it just depends on who's requesting it and where the water's going from.
And how many, I'm sorry, how many properties did you say there were in there right now? There's 123 residential properties?
The overall annexation. This is 24 dwelling units, 2 churches, and then the tree farm.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, if I just follow up on that, the water line's there, but would not the property owner have to pay for his or her connection to the water main?
Yeah, they would still have to be paying for their service line onto their property to connect into the water main.
And same on the sanitary?
Yeah.
Good afternoon. Pat Borer, Lincoln Fire. It's my understanding that you've had some questions about, from residents, that they may be losing some service, maybe not, maybe with Lincoln Fire as their provider won't get the same quality of service that they have today. There are a number of measures that you can use to measure the capability, the quality, the performance of a fire department. Some of them are third-party, completely outside any particular department. Some of them are developed within a department. For example, ISO is developed completely by a third-party group, Insurance Service Organization. Thank you. CARES registry is a registry, is a cardiac registry, completely independent third-party. Those are 2 measures that you could use. There are measures within a department that a department develops on their own, and those are response time data and effective response, force, accumulation data, and those take considerable staff time. So when you're talking about trying to compare Lincoln Fire and one of our adjoining fire departments, like Raymond in this case, very difficult to look at data and make a good comparison. And so I'm happy to answer questions about any of those measures, but I think most of you are very, very well versed on those measures. What I'd like to say is that we have a good working relationship with Raymond. And we have a mutual aid agreement, and both of us are interested in improving that relationship so it's an automatic aid agreement, meaning that when a call comes into 911, both agencies are dispatched at the same time, rather than the agency having jurisdiction being dispatched first, and then then the agency being dispatched, requesting the second agency being dispatched. In an automatic gate agreement, both agencies are dispatched at the same time. So I'm confident in saying that the sum of two agencies working together is better than either one of us alone.
Okay. John.
Well, I'm probably the one, Chief Spade, who's asked, excuse me, my goodness, that goes way back. Chief Bohr, whoa. I don't know what's going on here.
Back to the future.
Yeah, back to the past. Okay, Chief Bohr, I'm sorry. Anyway, I've asked a number of questions because over the years, as we've had annexations, I've been concerned about public safety. And in the last couple of days, I've read even more details where there's been talk of, for example, lining up 3 engines, for example, and getting to the nearest fire hydrant, so you pump it. So you take 3 engines to do that, plus they're not actually fighting a fire, so that means you have to have a couple more engines, or pumpers, whatever, trucks. And what concerns me is when we deploy our fire department resources, which would be the engines, trucks, and the emergency equipment, the ambulances, we have now, in many cases, when you, for example, there's an engine per company, per station. So once that goes, that station's out of service. Now, we had the big apartment fire last week, and I think there were 14 engines there, if I'm not mistaken. So that left 4 servicing the city.
Correct.
And that concerns me. Or, for example, if we dispatch an ambulance or something out, an engine out, to an incident, and 82% of the calls are medical, so we know most of them are going to be medical, but only about 130, maybe 140 calls a year are cardiac arrests. But let's say one of those non-cardiac arrests, everything's dispatched, and then boom, a cardiac arrest comes up. We don't have as good a response. It'd have to be a farther away station, and we're not sure what equipment would go. And so that's what concerns me. So when we talk about, I forgot, what's this term when you add the stations to pump from one to the other?
A relay operation.
Relay operation, thank you. When you have a relay operation, plus, so you're taking 3 engines or maybe more to relay, plus an additional couple to fight the fire, because you wouldn't relay if there is no fire. We've taken a substantial amount of our resources out of service. And again, even though we have 6 or 7 ambulances on call or on 24-hour service, that still leaves a lot of need for, under the current system, which I also have concerns about, but of sending the engines or trucks. And so we don't have them available. And so as we look at the whole system, yes, maybe with one of these new annexed areas, we could do the relaying and get the water to them, but what does it do to the rest of the residents? You know, we say that the new annexation should pay their share or something for new services, but actually we're taking away services and public safety to a certain degree from the rest of the city. And so that's why, as I look at it, whether, you know, some of the recent annexations people have written in, we don't have our fire hydrants and all. And it just really concerns me that are we being premature in some of these annexations where we don't have that. And likewise, I don't like to strain the fire department. And of course, right now, we're in the process of getting, I'm on the committee, you know, get the new fire stations, 4 new stations and some relocations. And we're trying to get response times better. But this is just now creating other demands. And for example, we were going to be voting on 3rd hearing on one, I believe or no, it's just by Planning Commission that citizens are concerned about out at Hillcrest Estates or Heights, I believe it is. And you know, one of the residents lives clear at the south end, which is 3/4 a mile from the end of O Street. So you just got to get to the development to even start, and then you have another 3/4 a mile. And there are no fire hydrants, and we talk about this, but I've asked for years on the city services are provided. Likewise, I'm concerned about our police department, police force, because we stretch them out in certain parts of the city and to have the resources there. So as we look at these, and the response I've always had when the annexations come before us is, well, the fire department signed off, police signed off. It seems like it just doesn't feel comfortable with this, my examples with police and fire and stretching our resources. So long-winded, I guess I look for some comments from you to tell me about that and what we're doing to the rest of the city and what we're doing to the fire department, the police department.
Yeah, great questions. Let me speak to water supply first, and then I'll talk about distribution of resources. When you talk about water supply, the best water supply is connecting to a hydrant. And whether that's a relay operation or you have a direct connection within a few hundred feet of where you're going. The water tender, which is a vehicle that carries a large amount of water, 2,500, 5,000 gallons. I spoke with Chief Cutlers this morning. He's the chief at Raymond. He said to have, in order to use water tenders and to create an extended water supply would take about 4 or 5 water tenders. Raymond has one, Waverly has one, Ceresco has one. So in order to, even though a water relay is labor intensive and apparatus intensive, it's better than a water tender because it's almost an indefinite water supply, even though you're relaying. You're relaying into another engine, and then you're pumping and you're relaying into another engine. There's nothing that says we couldn't use Raymond's fire engines to be a part of that. Some people have called it a daisy chain, part of that relay operation. And again, both departments working together. So with regards to distribution, you're correct. The more the city grows, it puts a strain on the fire department. And so in order to provide the same service to the citizens we have today, to all the citizens that are involved in the new areas, the department's going to have to grow to meet that demand at some point. Because, I mean, just the sheer geography, sheer land mass that you're trying to cover, and the number of people in that land mass that you're trying to cover. So we enjoy city growth. We think it's a good thing. We hope to grow along with it and to continue to provide the city services that most of the citizens enjoy today.
Well, I was encouraged to see the one picture there showing the fire hydrants along Fletcher Avenue. So you've got the water supply there.
In this particular area, we have good water.
No. Yeah. But where you have to do the daisy chain or relaying, that concerns me because we're taking resources to handle a new area because once we annex them, we want to give them service, give those residents service. Yet a lot of them say, gee, we're comfortable the way we are, even though it's rural fire district or maybe mutual aid. But I'm just concerned about the existing property owners and citizens in the city too, that we don't take resources away from them to their detriment here. And that doesn't sound right, but I mean, it's just, maybe it's better to wait till on annexation, for example, despite all these, this wording that was presented from the state statute and so forth on regarding annexation. Those were just guidelines anyway, but maybe we as a city should be looking at installing fire hydrants before we would annex, so we don't take the fire and the police resources away from the current citizens.
I think that you bring up good points, and part of what I would want to talk to you about on these points is that the two basic things. One is that when we look at the impact of this area in particular, and then the 8 areas that we've been identifying, they are limited in scope, purposely so, to identify the most obvious areas for annexation. Because we did handle it that way, when you put into context what that impact is on our fire protection services and our police services, it is a very small incremental increase compared to what we regularly add on to the city with our natural growth at the edges especially of 3,000 to 4,000 new residents per year. And that is a regular, every year that takes place. And so the point about extending services is absolutely true. With the point, though, on these annexations that are proposed is that as a percentage of the growth, it is a very, very small percentage. And so when we look at those policies of why we should be annexing them, based on those guides that we have in the comprehensive plan, that is why we are still saying that we should be annexing these areas. And I would add to what Pat was saying on the service that we would provide these areas, that we have walked through how we provide fire protection service to all of these areas. And we are confident that we have the ability to do that. And I would point to a fairly recent example of how this was handled, because I think the point needs to be made that the provision of water service in areas that are not annexed is not what our policy for the city is. And without that water, those fire hydrants would not be installed before annexation. The annexation is a critical point to take, a step to take, so that we could actually get those services installed. That is the policy of the city, and it has worked for us very well. But we would annex the areas prior to that service. And Firethorn Golf Course and development is a good example. And Pat actually brought this up through this process as being a good example of how this works. At the time of that annexation, we did not have the water service in all those streets, and therefore didn't have the fire hydrants either. And this topic was brought up at that time. What has happened over time is that The city water service has been installed through the process of special assessment districts through that area, as is the policy that we do for these areas that get annexed that don't yet have all the urban services. And now they do have the fire suppression capabilities through the fire hydrants. But until that happened, LFR did have a policy to get out there and have the type of response that Pat is talking about for these areas that don't yet have that, which is actually the connection of those lines, those hoses, with that unlimited supply from further away. So I just want to make sure that we're talking about that, because that is part of the discussion that's gone on to this point for all of these areas, as far as the ability to serve the area upon annexation.
Okay. Well, one final comment, if I may, we may have the ability to do it through that approach of relaying several engines, but having the ability versus what it does to impact the ability to serve the rest of Lincoln is not, you're not doing that. You're just focusing on this limited area. Say, yeah, we can get there, but what's it do to the whole operation?
Okay.
And that's what concerns me.
Benny, then Cindy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Gentlemen, thank you very much. I appreciate your comments, and you answered some of my questions in your statement. I just want to make sure that I've heard from a lot of residents via email and personal conversations and through letters, and there seems to be a belief that it's either or, either the volunteer or Lincoln. And I'm hearing you say today that it's not either or, it's both.
Mm-hmm. That's correct. We have a mutual aid agreement today that allows them to request our help. Matter of fact, there was a structure fire about a year ago out in this area where Raymond responded. They had a couple of members that were able to respond. They called us. Matter of fact, we had more people on the scene in their jurisdiction than they did. So then that mutual aid agreement goes both directions. If we need help in the city, we can ask Raymond Fire to send people into our jurisdiction to help us. And then I touched on the automatic aid agreement. That's an even better agreement because both agencies are sent at the time of dispatch. So it's not either or, you're correct. It is both agencies get to work together.
And that's kind of in place.
And the sum of that is better than one.
That's kind of a little bit in place now, but if we did annex, it will be a stronger relationship.
It is in place today, and we're both intent on signing or agreeing on an automatic aid agreement.
There's one other question, Mr. Chair, if you allow me. You talked earlier about the rate, how we could compare in rate.
Yeah.
And I wrote down ISOs, and I was trying to figure out what that was. I didn't write down the others. Can you repeat?
ISO is Insurance Service Organization.
Okay.
The insurance industry all across the country rates fire departments on their capability, their performance. Lincoln was just rated at Class 2. Class 1 is the very best. It's a 0 to 100 scoring system. We ranked an 85, which is midway between 2 and 1. I don't know what Raymond's rating is, but with the improvements that we're planning on making, we should be able to reach a 1 in a couple of years.
And what were the other suggested comparisons that you made?
The CARES registry, the cardiac registry that we are a part of, that determines cardiac save rate.
Okay.
That's an independent organization that measures the ability of a department to function in a cardiac arrest setting.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Cindy?
Yeah, thank you. Following up on Councilman Shoab's question, because we evidently were thinking along the same lines, I want to talk just a little bit about this automated agreement. Are you telling me that right now we actually, when Raymond receives a call, we receive a call and we respond at the same time? And to what degree? I mean, I'm sure we don't go all the way into Raymond.
No.
Can you tell me what the boundaries are for that?
Great question. And I'm going to make a plug for GeoAware CAD while I'm doing this. So right now, when 911 receives a call, without a GeoAware CAD, they try to pinpoint the location of the caller. They have a limited ability to do that. And wherever they determine the location of the caller to be, whoever's jurisdiction it is, if it happens to be in Raymond's jurisdiction, they dispatch Raymond. And then it's incumbent upon Raymond to call for us to help them if they want our help. Same thing in reverse. If a person calls 911 from inside the city limits, the dispatchers are trying to figure out where it's coming from, and if they determine that it's in the city limits, then it's Lincoln Fire's jurisdiction, and they will dispatch Lincoln Fire. And then it's incumbent upon us to request Raymond's help if we need their help. Does that answer your question?
Well, I guess I understood that was the mutual aid agreement.
That is.
But the automatic.
The automatic aid, so let me continue.
Thank you.
So the automatic aid agreement is a situation where the two closest departments are simultaneously dispatched to that address.
Is that in place right now?
No, we're working on that agreement. That's an agreement that Chief Despain is working with Chief Cutler from Raymond.
Oh, I see. Okay, I misunderstood. Thank you.
Okay, Carl.
Thank you. Okay. All right, focus. Okay, we're talking about Northwest Lincoln, okay? And that's the first item that's up. This area that's being considered for annexation is less than a mile away from an existing fire station. in the
Roughly a mile.
Highlands.
Parts of it are roughly a mile. Some of it are a little bit more, but Station 14 on Northwest First.
And our fire department provides both fire protection as well as medical services.
Yes, sir.
About how many cases a year would you say are fire versus medical?
Mr. Camp hit that pretty closely on the head. If you look at strictly call volume, you're looking at about 82% to all other call types,
Okay.
including fire. So 82% medical calls.
Okay. In this particular area, unlike some other areas we'll be considering, there are hydrants.
In this area, there are hydrants. In some of the other areas, they're not as readily available.
But the area we're talking about, we're focused. Okay,
Yes.
so this is what we're talking about. Yeah, I cannot. We'll see if what we hear from people, but it makes sense that this would be brought in. Thank you.
Okay, other questions? Lyrian.
I'm going to build on what John said because I think you touched on it too, David, and that is that we're growing our city. And most of the time that's privately initiated. And we have seen annexation request after annexation request this year. Do you have a rough estimate available on the number of acres we have annexed this year as a body, just this year?
Off the top of my head, I don't have the number. I can get that to you during the meeting, though. I don't think that's going to be a problem for us to find that out. I can say that roughly in the post Great Recession period now that we're in, we're annexing approximately a full square mile, perhaps more per year, perhaps less depending on what exactly is happening. So within that area, the potential for 2,000 more units just in those areas are possible when you add it all up.
So John's point is right in the sense that all of the annexation we're doing, regardless of who initiates it, that stretches LFR and LPD and takes away, potentially takes cars and trucks and engines away from existing city towards areas where there will be hundreds and hundreds of more homes, regardless of who's initiated the annexation. This is an issue all the time with every annexation we face, not just these here today. And it's one of the reasons why I think we've seen resident support for increased services coming out of LFR and LPD because we recognize a growing city needs growing resources.
Okay, thank you very much. Would anyone else like to testify on this item? Item 11. Thank you. Next item, please.
All right. Next then is item 12, annexation 17016, annexing approximately 203 acres of property generally located between 84th and 95th Streets, south of Holdridge Street.
Okay, I'm going to point out now that Councilwoman Raybold has excused herself from the chamber because she is recusing herself on this item because a family member lives in the area. So please go ahead, Paul.
Okay. Good evening, Paul Barnes with the Planning Department. So this is the second annexation area that we're going to look at this evening. This would be mostly the Sunrise Estates subdivision, and we have a couple of other properties along Holdridge, so east of 84th Street. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time going over all that additional information again, but I will point out that we do have, with the criteria from our comprehensive plan, the first and the last here, this area does fall within Tier 1, Priority B. This is also contiguous to the city limits on multiple sides. We'll have a map up on here that we can show you that. It is an ag zoning, and so the uses and things as they are today would continue even if annexed. Basic infrastructure is in place. There are many stub streets on adjacent approved developments and built developments that already have the water and sewer stubbed up to this subdivision. And then I'll also note that it is in that urban character that I described earlier. And the comments that we've received have basically been in three categories, that being emergency response for mostly fire, but medical as well, and we can have Assistant Chief address those concerns. Also, the timing and process for getting utilities into the subdivision. And then also I'll note the school district, which would actually change. It's currently Waverly School District and would become LPS upon annexation. And we did have multiple outreach to the superintendent of Waverly School District beginning in August via email and also phone calls.
I'll start out by answering a question from last time. So to date, we've annexed 495 acres this year so far.
Have any of those annexation proposals been denied?
Not that I'm aware of.
I mean,
no.
anything that's come before, yeah. Okay.
So looking at this specific area, it's 203 acres, 29 dwelling units, and a church. It also includes portions of Holdridge. So Holdridge today goes from city, rural, city. This would solve that issue. Zooming out a little bit, we can see this is the area we're talking about in blue. We actually have Waterford Estates. Further to the east, we also have SEC, and then of course the existing urban development to the west. This area is in Waverly Public Schools. It would switch to LPS upon annexation. We've had a few emails and then a conversation with the Waverly superintendent about this annexation, so they are aware of it. This is in Southeast Rural Fire and Rescue, and it would switch to LFR, of course, upon annexation. I think the only other thing I really want to touch on with this is that Sunrise Estates was approved in 1989 as a build-through acreage. So even back at the time of original approval, there was a lot of discussion about this being eventually surrounded by the city and annexed. When it was approved originally, it was actually adjacent to the city. But we weren't able to provide utilities to it at that time, so it wasn't actually annexed. So it was approved as a build-through acreage, which means we have the lots that were platted. Within that, though, there was a conceptual layout for future subdivisions. So you can kind of see here there's multiple ghost lots or lots that don't really exist yet today that are planned out with the idea that this will eventually be surrounded and annexed. So it kind of provides the route for future urbanization of this area. This particular annexation doesn't necessarily mean any of these lots need to be subdivided. That would be at the property owner's requests. But I just wanted to bring that up just to point out that even going back to the original approval of this subdivision, there was discussions about when this is going to be annexed because we knew in the next few decades it was going to be surrounded. Paul mentioned the utilities, and I'll just show them up here real quick just so we can see. This area is completely surrounded by sewer and water. At each of the local roads, there's sewer and water actually stubbed in. So urbanization is pretty clear in terms of how sewer and water is going to be provided. And then I'll just leave this up. If Pat wants to say anything else particular to this annexation, but as you can see, it's completely surrounded by hydrants today.
Again, Pat, excuse me, Pat Borer, Lincoln Fire. I just want to make a couple of points, and then I'll entertain any question. This right here is Southeast Rural Fire Station, but they don't staff. Rural fire departments don't staff their stations. They may have people there occasionally if they're training or they're doing maintenance, something like that, but they don't staff their stations. I understand that there are members of Southeast Rural that live around the station, so they could get there quickly. But then you have to look at an effective response force. It's that accumulation of the right number of people to do the work that needs to be done. So I would go back to Mr. Shobe's point, and that is you don't have to choose between one or the other. We can work together. The sum of both of us working together provides a better choice than one of us alone. And as you can tell, we can respond on East Avon. We can respond on these streets where they have a fire hydrant right at the edge of the subdivision, or right at the edge of the development, excuse me, and bring it in and bring a hydrant line in, and we can work off of it. So I'll entertain any questions.
Carl, then John.
Chief Borer, you're looking at a new station in this area.
Yes, sir.
Do you have the land secured for that?
I wish I could say yes.
Oh, all right, okay.
But no, I don't at the time. We are looking at a station in this area. Had a realtor contact us and offer a piece of property that's in the right area. So things are looking very good.
Okay, thank you.
John? Refresh my memory now, so homes start getting built here and the prior showing the individual lots that could be mapped out. With that construction, would the developer then put in fire hydrants along with the city, or how does that time-wise the sequence?
I'll turn that over to Andrew.
I'm not done with you though.
Okay.
Yeah, there'd be to urbanize it, there'd be water and sewer districts that would need to be requested, and then hydrants would be put in with the water district.
So that'd probably be done simultaneously or before the actual homes are built?
Yeah, it would be with final plat when the things were platted.
So generally, where there's nothing there right now, we don't have to worry so much, but how many residential units are there right now?
This
You said 29.
29, yeah.
Now, those are basically on the perimeter?
What was that? Sorry.
Are they on the perimeter of the?
Oh, how many hydrants are there?
No. The dwelling units, are they kind of on the perimeter area, or are they some?
They're almost, this is a church, the rest of these are residential lots, except this is an outlot down here.
And that's 84th to 95th?
Roughly, yeah.
So at roughly 350 feet a block, so what's that, about a mile? So if there's a fire in the
98th would be
middle
the
of it
mile
there, you
road,
gotta go
so-
2.5 miles of hose.
Well, okay, so there's a scale down here, 1,000 feet.
Uh-huh.
So, I mean, you can kind of measure out.
3,000.
Yeah.
Usually a city block is 350 feet. So, okay. Just trying to think how many engines we need to hook up there to get that from that fire hydrant.
Again, most of that's, the hydrants are stubbed in and they're actually positioned very well. Like this one on East Avon can go a considerable distance without the relay operation. You can bring this one in, this one in, this one in. So that's actually, the current hydrants are actually positioned very well.
How far can you go from a hydrant with hose with a single engine?
We have 750 feet of 5-inch hose, so you could go 750 feet with just one engine. And we have 1,000 feet of 2.5-inch hose that if it were longer than 750 feet, you could go 1,000 feet with one engine.
Okay. And I want to concur with my colleague, Mr. Estridge, when he commented about the Northwest Lincoln area, because this is good to see this, and this is the first time we've really seen the fire hydrant. So that's very helpful, and some of my earlier comments are they're different aspects to each annexation, so those are the things that make it helpful to all of us. Thank you.
Leary.
So, Chief Borer, you've stated tonight that you have mutual aid agreements, so these areas proposed for annexation would have the benefits of both rural and city fire and rescue. Is that true for the people on either side of them, or is it just specific to these proposed areas we're talking about tonight?
No, these folks up in here that currently live, well, these folks currently live in Southeast Rural, but these folks will remain in Southeast Rural District, and they have the benefit of a mutual aid agreement today.
Okay, what about, but then the ones that are just city, and they're already part of the city limits, they don't have?
No, they enjoy the benefit of a mutual aid agreement. If we're going there and we need help, we'll call Southeast Rural, and they'll come and help us.
Okay, so this is a question for planning then. One of the main justifications for these annexations is to clarify who responds when, because there's confusion about emergency deployment. But what I'm hearing now is that actually everybody goes, so how are we clarifying emergency service deployment?
I think I can clear that up, and it goes back to Cindy's question earlier. Right now, what happens is when a call comes to 911 center, the dispatcher tries to figure out whose jurisdiction it is. I mean, if it's near Holmes Lake, it's easy. If it's here, it's a little more difficult to determine whose jurisdiction it is. So they make a determination on whose district it is, and they send that jurisdiction. So if it's in the city, they send Lincoln Fire. If it's over here, they'll send Southeast Rural. Then it's incumbent upon that agency, if they need help, to ask for it from the other agency.
So are you saying that the automatic mutual aid to these areas has to be set up still?
Yes.
And when would that happen then?
We have a meeting
Upon
next. We have a
annexation?
meeting next week with the chief from Southeast Rural, And based upon our phone conversations, he's very interested in setting up that automatic gate agreement.
And that's not confusing to 911 if they have to decide where to send both automatically and where to send one or the other?
It's always confusing for 911. If you remember the previous annexation along the interstate, again, when you have a person driving down the interstate making a 911 call, it's very difficult for them to determine where the call is coming from. And anytime you're on the periphery, it's a challenge for them to determine, and sometimes they make their best guess. And there have been times when we've gone to Raymond's jurisdiction simply because they thought it was ours, and vice versa. So we're excited about a geo-aware CAD. I know it's expensive, but that will eliminate that problem.
I think maybe I could also add to the answer to your question. Yes, the topic of fire service and level of service has become a significant topic for this whole process. But from the staff's perspective, our point has been and continues to be that the level of service and the clarity of that service is what Pat was just talking about, which is who gets the initial call from 911 to make it clear who is responding. These annexations will bring clarity to who is getting that first initial call. And what we have been saying consistently is that the level of service that these areas will get from Lincoln Fire and Rescue will be just as good, if not better, and I'm confident to say that it would be better moving forward. So that's the main point from the staff, but the conversation and the testimony has brought this to the fore. So that's really what has happened here.
Thank you both for the clarification.
Okay, Cindy?
Thank you. So I have questions for everyone that's already been up here, but I'll do it one at a time because they kept sitting down and I was like, oh okay.
I won't go anywhere now.
Thank you. So when this, and I'll talk with you first, Dave. Thank you very much for being here. When this was studied in 2008 for annexation, was the initial plan that this was going to be annexed at a date later than 2017?
No.
Okay, so, because I've heard some reports that maybe it was expected in 2020.
And we have heard that too, and then I'm glad you asked that question because I think it is necessary to clarify that point now. Our process now, and any point in the past, from our department and from other departments of the city, have not said that they will not be annexed at a certain point or until a certain point. There has been there is a letter from Olson Associates that did work for the sewer line in Hillcrest, in the Hillcrest area. That letter referenced that the sewer project would not necessarily kick in gear an annexation process. That was in 2016, that letter was sent. So there has been some misunderstanding of what the intention of the city has been, but we have not said that we shall not or will not annex an area by a certain date. We didn't say that in 2008, and we haven't said it in this process thus far.
Okay, thank you. And then I wanted to ask a question from of Andrew. Thank you for being up there. I appreciate that. So you had mentioned. I wanted to talk about and maybe I need to ask the chief about this, but my understanding is that the property north of Holdridge is not yet being annexed. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, but we do have, as I read the report, it looked like that we had fire hydrants there. Can you explain how that process took place? Like, why do we have fire hydrants where we're not annexing, but now we're being told that there can't be fire hydrants on this property prior to annexation?
Yeah, and Holdridge is a little different because it's not a local street, so it has water lines and hydrants in it as an arterial. So that's why there's hydrants there. The reason we're not including the north properties are twofold. One is, as Paul mentioned, we identified a few thousand acres of areas that could have been annexed or could have been identified for annexation. We wanted to narrow it down into the most glaringly obvious, clear-cut areas. These north acreage properties, you can see they don't have any right-of-way necessarily. They have kind of, well, when we get it pulled up, they have flag lots onto Holdridge. So to get sewer and water up there, there'd have to be some easements. It's possible, but it's just not quite as clear, and it's also a basin boundary. somewhere up here. So it's just not quite as clear as looking at Sunrise. They have streets, they actually have sewer and water stubbed up to that right of way. It's very clear how sewer and water is going to serve the Sunrise properties.
Andrew, maybe just explain what you meant by basin boundary.
So we have our drainage basins for sewer. This area is near the edge of a basin. So up here drains that way, and here drains this way. So.
Okay. And then also, I was wanting to ask you about, oh my gosh, no, I just forgot it for a minute. Okay. So, well, can you tell me what is the urban character? Well, no, here, that reminds me of the first question. I'm sorry, I apologize. Have any of the 29 property owners asked for to be subdivided at all? Their property be subdivided?
We certainly haven't got any formal requests. I know over time we have heard from a couple people who said, yeah, I'm okay with being annexed. But, I mean, nothing official. No one's put in any requests to subdivide their lots or anything like that.
Okay, so can then go to my next question, what it gives it the urban character?
Well, today these are developed as houses, so even like a 3-acre acreage we would say is urban in character. And as Paul was talking about, it's defined by its urban context, more so than its use, even in some cases. So we do have a farm along Holdridge here, but it's surrounded by urban development. City utilities are available right next door, so that gives it its urban character.
So if city utilities are available and it's next to urban, then it can have urban character?
In a broad sense, it can be defined by the setting that the lot is in. So say if you had, just imagine you had a 40-acre farm in the middle of Lincoln, we would say it's urban in character. Even though it's a farm, it's surrounded by city, it's urban in character.
Okay, so the reason I'm asking, one of the things I find a little bit disturbing is whenever you annex anything, you automatically will be contiguous to the next property. And if you have this urban character, then automatically then it'll be next to this contiguous property. And so does it all just become urban character as we just move out and sprawl wherever we go?
So that also kind of goes back to what Paul was saying. There are a lot of properties surrounding the city that we could probably define as urban in character per the Supreme Court's rulings. We're not looking to annex all of those. But yes, I mean, just purely looking at urban in character, there are a lot more properties that are urban in character surrounding the city.
Your question is well taken because it goes right back to where we started with our study had a much larger consideration of what areas could qualify for annexation. And so it was much larger. What we have brought before you for your consideration are these 8 areas that meet the most reasons of why we should annex them. They are closer into the city. They are more surrounded. They have those urban services very clearly available to them. There isn't a question about the services that are available. But yeah, in the broadest extent, you could have a lot of area that would be considered for annexation. And quite frankly, that is why we do annex those areas that are developed very much on the edge, but still have a piece that is contiguous to the city as new development happens, because that is one way to have annexation happen, even though it is on the edge and just emerging as a neighborhood. So that's how I would answer that, is that we had much more area considered for this annexation package. We whittled it down to the most obvious areas. So that goes to your point about you could have a lot more under consideration.
And to clear up
Thank you.
something a little bit with urban in character, one of the, I don't remember which exact court case it was, but they did present kind of a general rule or guideline that we can use when looking at if something's urban in character. And it's really looking at the value of the land, and if it's worth more for development property than it is for ag, then it's fair to say it's urban in character. So you can imagine, you know, a farm 10 miles out of the city, it's probably not worth much for development. It's worth a lot for ag. As you get closer in the city, that development potential becomes higher, the development value becomes higher, whereas you get in a situation like this, it's almost surrounded by the city, its development value is worth a lot more than its ag value today. So it would be urban in character.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Thank you very much. Thank you. Would anyone else like to testify on this item? Please come forward if you intend on testifying.
I'm John Harper. I reside at 9031 Avon Lane. I've been there since the inception of this development. Worked with Hub Hall and everybody on it. And I just wanted to bring up a couple points that I found were interesting. One thing, we own the street lights out there. We pay the electric on it, we maintain them. Yeah, on the budget for this annexation, it doesn't show anything on that. We currently spend probably, I think, about $2,000 a year to LES for the electricity, plus we maintain them. That's going to be an annual cost to LES that's not listed on your paperwork. I just wondering why that was never mentioned. I know LES knows about it. I called them, talked to them. I talked to planning about it a little bit, and it's interesting to me why that wasn't mentioned to anybody or in your chart. And the cost for maintenance out there on those lights varies from year to year because of vandalism, just general maintenance, they go out, things like that. So it's hard to define exactly what that annual cost is per year. Next thing I thought was interesting, on that first chart, they showed the roads, or wheel tax will not come close to paying the maintenance and care of those roads out there. They show about deficient about $8,000 a year. LES is going to lose money on this deal, cost them money, but yet you don't see that on this chart of all the departments. It's all fine with them. If I was losing that kind of money annually per year, I would at least question running a business or whatever you're doing. Why do I want to lose money every year and say it's just fine, go ahead and annex it? Andrew was talking, he mentioned about the benefits we receive from the city. You've been receiving them all the time. We keep questioning, what are those benefits? He said we drive on their streets. Everybody around here drives on city streets, county streets, state roads. People from all over 60 miles around come to work in Lincoln. You don't charge them wheel tax. Do we benefit from, I don't know what the benefit is, but I can tell you one thing. We get great snow removal in our area. The county removes it as soon as it snows, sometimes twice a day. When that happens, like people from the city up on 86th Street, traffic increases in front of my house, has ever since I've been there. That's because the city doesn't remove the snow in residential very well. It's well known. They do the arterials first. A day or two later, they try to hit the residential. It's very hard to pull out on 84th Street from Larson Boulevard because whoever plows 84th Street just plows it up there, and then you got a ridge there you got to drive through to pull out on 84th, so that people drive through our neighborhood and get out to Holdry Street, which is plowed nice and clean. Parks, he said we use the parks all the time. We got 3 to 6 acres per lot. Our homes are our parks, basically. Very few people, I think, actually use the city parks anymore that live out there. So essentially, I'm opposed to this annexation. There's other reasons, but we have some other speakers who bring those up.
Okay.
Anybody have any questions?
Other questions for Mr. Harper? Thank you, sir. Next testifier.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to speak. And based on what I've heard here, thank you for your service. It doesn't look like a job I'd want.
Please introduce yourself.
I'm Dan Henna. I live at 9500 Eastview Road in the middle of Sunrise Estates. I wrote a letter to all of you requesting a delay in annexation. I'm here to ask you to exercise some common sense to get things organized properly before you make a move. I've owned and run businesses in Lincoln for 50 years. I always made the mistake of estimating the cost of a move before I made it and knowing where I was going before I started. And I've learned from our friends at City Planning that that's the wrong way to go at it. You're supposed to decide where you're going to go and annex the property and then figure it out. You don't do a cost estimate for putting in all the sewers and water and another fire station and a few more policemen and another snowplow. You don't do any of that until you made your decision. My goodness, I wasted a lot of time in all those 50 years doing all these analysis of different options. It amazes me that I was so stupid. Our point is we'd like this delayed. It makes sense to me to wait until we build that fire station at 84th and Layton. That will resolve a lot of our concerns about fire coverage. It'll resolve a lot of the concerns about the drain on fire services for the rest of the citizens. Mr. Camp raised a good point. If there's a fire in our neighborhood and they have to send 4 fire trucks out to do it, a whole lot of people in this city have been put at greater risk. City Planning takes the position that this annexation could be done and you can generate $42,600 in additional property tax at no additional cost. You're going to add roughly 50 square blocks to the city of Lincoln at no additional cost. My goodness, we must be really overstaffed in several of our places if that's the case. You can't add 50 square blocks without costing a lot of money. So we're asking that you wait at least until that fire station at 84th and Layton is built. Ask City Planning to do a cost appraisal for what it's going to cost to build the streets or fix the streets, add fire hydrants, water, sewer, add the extra snow removal truck, the extra couple of cops and cop cars. Do that cost estimate and then bring it back and tell us how far $42,600 in additional property taxes is going to go. City Planning presents this that it's a matter of being fair to current residents. Adding roughly 50 square blocks, which pulls on all of the city's services, is not being fair to the rest of the city. You know, City Planning basically says we're a bunch of spoiled folks that we live out there on the edge of town and we use the city's resources without paying for it. Guess what happens when you annex that 203 acres? It's going to be a bigger drain on city resources, and our $42,000 property tax ain't going to cover it. The rest of the city will lose services, or you'll have to spend more money, or both, probably both. The last point I want to make, and I'll take exception with something that was said here from City Planning. From my perception, we were blindsided. We have been told as members of Sunrise Estates for years that we would probably be annexed. It would probably be in the time frame of 2020 to 2025. And we've all accepted that. We will still accept it.
1 minute.
The last point is when low-density acreage areas are proposed for annexation due to the city's annexation policies, additional steps should be taken to ease the transition. So our SECA board met with or called City Planning and asked them if there was any update on annexation in July, and the word was there's no change. And on August 1st, a letter was sent out telling us that we were about to be annexed. Now, I don't think that's proper notice. We were blindsided. You can make this right if you slow the horse down, get things in the right order, build your fire station, get some cost estimates, give us some time to make adjustments. Thank you.
Okay, other questions for Mr. Henna? Thank you. Next testifier, please.
Thank you, Teresa.
Name is Dennis Schutte. I live at 9401 Avon Lane. And we received a letter the first week of August. The County Planning Department had identified our properties as potential annexation. And it's very surprising since we were repeatedly told not before 2020, 2025. And if you go back onto the maps that the City Planning Department had on their website, they had different colored codes around on the properties, and it gave dates on the different codes. So it's not that we were never led to believe that that would be the true facts. And we were also told, or led to believe, that when they did annex our property, they would annex all the way to Layton Street, all the way to 98th to get it all in at one time, which is now not the process. And we knew we were going to be annexed, and all we wanted was a little notice. That's why we contacted the planning department before every annual meeting that happens in September. And upon receiving the letter, we attended the informational meetings on August 24th. We made trips to the planning department, city county building, the fire station, and the answers that we received verbally and what's in print are conflicting. We have not had time to sort everything out. Receiving the letter, I received my letter August 5th. The informational meeting was August 24th. And we were told our infrastructure would be probably divided by 28. And for the outlots and everything like that to be fair. And then we were also told that any individual property owner can request, and then they will only be billed, or the people between them and the where the sewer line starts would be billed. Are we going to be, all 28 of us are going to have to pay for part of that, or they're going to get out of paying for the outlots? Or we have questions that we have not had time to get answers for, because less than 90 days from the time we received notice, we're here in front of you. And we made a request for timeline on infrastructure. We get, well, not until you ask for it. And the timing and cost are a major concern of ours. We've been told also that 51% would have to agree to it. And then we're in print, it says that anybody can request it if it's approved. And we've been told we've got adequate fire protection. And if you look at the, even their chart, I've got one I can put on there. But if you look at their chart, when you have a fire engine or a fire hydrant down here, and I live right here, that's 2 trucks. And if it's here, we've got to make a decision if they're going to come from this fire hydrant or this fire hydrant. If it's up here, 2,300 feet away, this is the closest fire hydrant. Holdridge, 2,587 cars a day drive by per the 2011 study. And we can shut it down and use those. But there's different entrances to that. I don't see how it's going to clarify the emergency services. First, we've heard about the agreement that they're gonna call them both at the same time. It's always been LFR will come out first, and they will ask for help if they need it. And the other isn't in place yet, so I don't think the annexation should be in place yet. I don't believe it should be in place till we have more fire protection for everybody.
Other questions? John?
Yes, Mr. Schutte, just for clarification, you just mentioned that LFR comes out first now?
From what, no, right now we're in Southeast.
Okay.
But we were told repeatedly by the fire department at the planning commission, and it's in the minutes that Chief Boyer said that they would daisy chain the trucks through there. And tonight is the first we ever heard of we knew there was mutual aid agreements, but that they would come out first and they would call for mutual aid, as at this time it still sets.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Next testifier.
Would you please distribute those?
Thank you, Teresa.
Good evening.
Microphone's over here. Just
Oh.
step right to there. There you go.
Good evening, Mr. Christensen and City Council members. I'm Dan Howell. I live at 1001 North 92nd Street in Sunrise Estates. And I'm opposed to the annexation for fire and safety reasons. A few years ago, my wife was home alone. She smelled smoke and saw a huge fire rapidly approaching our home. She called 911. Southeast Fire Department arrived quickly on site and began driving multiple fire trucks across my property to control the raging fire. Southeast has the appropriate equipment and training to successfully control fast-moving fires and prevent structure fires. Southeast arrived on site with enough water on board to effectively fight fast-moving fires. The city does not have equipment or the training to go off-road to control grass fires. The fire threatened multiple homeowners. It started from a residence over here, and it spread clear through this whole area, right up to this fence line. The fire threatened multiple homeowners, but only resulted in property damage, not structural damage. It started off-site, quickly raced north across my property, Kramer's property, and to Wellman's property line. For us, what matters most is it was stopped at the foundation of my house. Southeast is located less than a mile from us. If Southeast had not quickly arrived and controlled this quickly moving fire, it would have reached our homes and proceeded north across the hayfield and reached Wellman's residence as well. Lincoln Fire and Rescue is an excellent fire department. It's dedicated to serving Lincoln. However, we are outside of Lincoln and do not have fire hydrants to which they can connect. Assistant Chief Pat Borer has stated in Planning Commission hearings that he can provide adequate fire protection. This was not challenged by the City Planning Commission. Please look at the facts regarding fire response time. The 2016 annual report indicates effective fire forces of 16 to 19 firefighters had fires in 10 minutes and 20 seconds. Their goal was 90%. They achieved 59.1%. So in other words, more than 40% of the time, they failed to have an effective response force at fires within 10 minutes and 20 seconds. Regarding the response time, this same report, it states that the data shown that the department is meeting or exceeding our goals in all categories except for response times, which are steadily declining over time, primarily due to geographic expansion of the city without additional fire stations to cover the new areas. The fire department's 2015 annual report lists the number of total responses for each station. The demand on the 3 stations close to us is in the very high category, with Station 5 in the extremely high category. Their 2014 optimization studies, this is the point at which they need to be evaluated. My home is at 1001 North 92nd Street. It is nearly a half mile from the nearest fire hydrant. Pat said LF&R could connect multiple fire engines to pump water to our homes. In this scenario, the fire engine would be a maximum of 750 feet apart. It would require a minimum of 3 engines to reach and man, and it would take some firefighters to man those fire engines while they're pumping. In an event of a fire, additional equipment would be required to fight the fire, and the closest...
That's upside down for everybody else.
Oh my gosh, sorry. The distances they have is 2.7 mile, 2.8, and 4.2 mile. It would take multiple engines to reach my place. The times for each station are listed, but it would be an additive thing. If someone comes out, determines I need to have a second or third unit come, and they start rolling, then I'm looking at additional time to come. If it takes more than 3, it's even more distant to respond to my area. I'm requesting that please delay annexation until a fire station is built and appropriately manned to provide adequate fire protection for us and not further dilute already stretched fire response capabilities for city homeowners. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to this issue.
Are there questions for Mr. Howell? Thank you, sir. Testifier.
So good afternoon. Hi, my name is Ted Wolfram. I live at 1040 North 92nd Street. And one of the things I wanted to do is really echo what Dan had just talked about. Dan and I are neighbors because we live right across the street. The area right here in red is my residence, and that's exactly 2,300 feet from the nearest hydrant, which is this hydrant, which is right over here. So this represents our entire Sunrise Estates. There's a hydrants here that I've kind of highlighted that would probably be the easiest for them to be able to hook up to be able to provide fire. And again, I also want to, just for proximity perspective, point right out here, this is where Southeast Fire and Rescue is located. So the location, how it presents to us is right there, very close to us. So, the reason I bring this up is because my wife and I moved to the Lincoln area 20 months ago. We're one of those that percentages just moved in here within the last year or 2 years. And the reason we moved into this area is because of family. Both of our daughters live here in Lincoln, and we found this location, which is exactly right in between both of our daughters, about a little less than a mile one direction than the other. And by having my daughter so close, it also gives us the opportunity to be with our grandchildren. We have 5 grandchildren. Any of those that have grandchildren understand that grandkids love to spend time at their grandparents' house. And not just spend time, but also spend the night. So one of our concerns, again, as we talk about this, is the response time and being able to get to our fire and provide safety to not just my wife and myself, but also those grandkids that are going to be staying at our house and having a great time. As I mentioned, my wife and I just moved here from Houston. By the way, I have to say, go Astros. We just moved here from Houston, and this isn't the first time we've been annexed. Living in Houston, the community we lived in then was up for annexation to be part of the city of Houston. And at that point in time, we were very much in favor of it because of the city services that were going to be provided. Not only did we also have hydrants, sewage, the water, there was also a new fire station that was being built and manned prior to the annexation of it to be able to handle the new population of people that's going to be part of the city. I bring this up not to say that I'm always opposed to annexation, because I think annexation can be a good thing. What I'm raising right now, really from our perspective, at least from my perspective, is really the timing and kind of the escalation of this whole time period to be able to annex our subdivision. I've handed this out to you, but I wanted to present these letters. Like many subdivisions, we have homeowners association, and we also have a very active governing board which handles a lot of these types of discussions. Our governing board has been very proactive in this process. You've probably heard some of this already, but I think it's well worth repeating. We've been very proactive in understanding when we might be annexed. We knew that annexation was on the horizon with the way that Waterford Estates was there and the different properties. We knew that we were surrounded by others, so we knew this was going to happen. But we started this proactive of steps of trying to find out when this is going to occur. We were under the impression, again, it's been refuted tonight by the city planning, but we were under the impression, had been told that we were going to be looking at annexation from the year 2020 and on. And every year prior to our annual homeowners meeting, we would reach out to the planning committee to find out if this was still the case. And the answer that was being provided back to us at that point in time was yes, we are still on charge for that. Of course, it was no surprise, of course, when we received this letter in the mail on the week of August 1st. It starts talking about annexation. Just without some dates, you can see here that it was sent on August 1st. We had these informational meetings, and there was the one that was closest to us that we all attended.
1 minute.
Okay, was on the 24th. Man, 5 minutes goes fast. And the other thing that I also wanted to point down here is where it says the city council would schedule public hearings in the month of December. And here we are today, less than 90 days, a whole month and a half earlier than what we were anticipating to be able to talk with you guys. So that came up much, much quicker than we were expecting. So I guess our question is why the urgency? Why is this being what we feel like being rushed through and pushed through? We haven't had time to be able to do this planning, what we were trying to do with our proactiveness, trying to determine when this is going to occur. One other thing that I want to touch about, we talked about the safety with fire, but the other has to do with our students that live in our area. It was mentioned that our students go to Waverly, and that Waverly provides bus service, and these children are being picked up at their homes by this bus service, at their street, or not at their street, but at their driveway to their house. So they're provided security, they're provided safety. On those cold mornings, they can sit inside and wait for the bus to come up to be able to run out and pick up the bus very quickly. The new area where this is going to be now, because if we get annexed, that bus service no longer comes, so they have to go out onto Holdridge. That would be the closest place where they could be able to catch the bus to be able to get out to Waverly. If we do get annexed, the option would be to stay here, to opt in and stay within LPS. There is no bus service for those students at that point in time, and so that means parents are now going to have to be able to drive their kids to school and be able to join in that congested area around the schools to be able to drop their kids off. So we also are looking at the safety of our students that are part of our schools to make sure that they are safe to be able to get to and from schools.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Any questions?
Questions for Mr. Wolfram? Thank you, sir. Next testifier, please.
Good evening. My name is Janet Chung. I live at 9501 Eastview Road. I'm president of the Sunrise Estates Community Association. And I just want to recognize quite a few of our homeowners are here tonight. If you could please stand up and let them know that you're with our neighborhood, that'd be great.
Thank
you. On behalf of the Sunrise Estates Community Association, we request that you delay annexation of our association. You've heard some of the concerns that we've had. We don't see any benefits to being annexed at this time, and we're still trying to sort through some of the conflicting information that we've gotten. As Ted just mentioned, some of the dates have rushed us through some of the things and the questions that we've been looking at. And you've seen some of the statistics and the miles and the minutes, I think, for driving for fire response. So I'm putting up here because I'm kind of a map person myself. So you can actually see, I've got plotted, as Dan Howe and Ted mentioned, that's Dan Howe's address, and you can see Southeast Rural is almost right next to that on this, and this is a MapQuest map. But you can see the 3 LFR stations and how far those engines would have to come in order to respond to our neighborhood. As you've heard, there's no hydrants in our neighborhood. Our community consists of 3 to 5 acres generally to each homeowner with a lot of prairie grass. So you heard the story from Dan Howe about the grass catching fire between the homes and possibly spreading to the 20-acre farm that's north of us, and the fact that Southeast Rural adequately and quickly responded to put the fire out so that it did not spread to the structures. We also have an 11-acre community property which is butted by Waterford Estates. So if there happened to be a fire in that 11 acres of hay that we're growing, that could, a quick response is needed for those homeowners from Waterford Estates that border that property. They would want, I'm sure, a very quick response when they see fire in a field next to their homes. I think there's probably like 30 homes along that field. There was also, I think, but nobody really referenced it, but it's in your packet. There was a letter about, or an article in the Journal Star that talks about the lack of hydrants and how that affected a house in Sky Ranch Acres. The house was destroyed. There were about 80 firefighters that responded to that fire, and that was assisted with mutual aid by some of the area volunteer departments, including Waverly, Southeast Rural, and some others. And then lastly, I'd like to reference a Journal Star article, which the city council members have in the packet that I passed out. But it's a Journal Star article that talked about the city not accepting a federal grant to add firefighters, to hire firefighters. And I'm sure that many of the council members are aware of that and were involved in the discussion, but in the article, Chief Despain mentions that in order to meet national goal, the city would have to hire an additional 30 firefighters. And at the time that this article was written, it said, Despain said, LFR trucks and engines currently go out with 4 people 40% of the time. So in closing, I would just like to say that we ask that you consider not only our neighborhood's families, but also the residents of the city of Lincoln by delaying annexation until LFR has added a fire station and additional firefighters to respond to the community's emergency response needs. And I also included in your packet a letter signed by all of the homeowners in the Sunrise Estates Community Association asking for the delay in annexation. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Questions? First, Carl, then Cindy.
Okay, just a quick question. Ms. Chung, you indicated that, and several others who have testified indicated you would like a delay. Can you define what a reasonable delay is?
A delay until the fire station is built and there are firefighters that can serve and respond to our neighborhood in a timely manner.
Okay, thank you.
Cindy?
Thank you. I see the page that you provided with signatures. This is every homeowner affected by the annexation?
Yeah, in Sunrise Estates, yes.
In Sunrise Estates, and every one of them is opposed to the annexation at this time?
Yes.
But you all understood or have some understanding that annexation will take place at?
We, like several people have said, we were told, or we thought it'd be around 2020, 2025.
Okay. And so the delay you're asking for is the fire station to be built in that area?
And we're doing that, like I said, not just on behalf of our neighborhood, but for the community. I was surprised to read some of the comments in the articles. I was not aware that that the city had not been hiring firefighters, and I guess I don't keep up on that kind of information. I probably need to watch these meetings more closely now.
And I don't know if you know the answer to this, but I know that one of the things that was mentioned as part of this annexation in the local paper, I think, was the fact that there would be our no burn laws would be extended. Do you have any knowledge or idea of how that might impact the folks in Sunrise Estates?
We were told, I think one of our residents asked about the burn permits, and because we would be in the city, there's no, I'm not a city expert, but someone on city staff said we would not be allowed to burn. So I'm not sure exactly how we would maintain the prairie grasses. I guess we'll have to look at that, but that was not something we were looking at right away, so.
So when you guys have been considering the 2020, potential annexation in 2020, is that one of the things you've been discussing, having more time to figure out how to deal with those things?
Actually, one of our concerns is, and it was mentioned, is the ghost plotting or platting, because we would have to do some approvals to do any type of changes for that, and we'd have to, our community was looking at that and the community property, how we were going to address the cost involved with all of that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions? Thank you very much. Would anyone else like to testify on this item? Next item, please.
Roy,
Yes.
could I ask a couple staff questions while we're still fresh on this? Thank you. If we move on, I may not retain this till next week. So I did have a couple of questions that came up. Thank you very much. So one is, I think I heard several times about the time element and wondering why it moved so quickly from August till now. And someone even mentioned that they thought we weren't supposed to have it in front of us till December. Can any of you answer for me why it needs to move so quickly, or why the urgency here?
I think go ahead. I'll go back to the timeline that we had beginning in July with publishing that draft. From the beginning, we were considering the impacts to the property owners, the potential impacts, as well as the increase in tax. And the timing that was put together and the track that we could still be on is that the city levy would be kicking in 2018, but not due and paid until 2019. So although there would be some changes that would happen upon annexation, such as the LFR district, knowing that financial change wouldn't happen for about a year does give that buffer of time and allows for people to plan for that. I think the letter did reference a tentative date before council in December, and that was to gather that idea that we wanted to have these before you for a decision before the end of the year, so we could meet that goal of building in that year before the tax would be due.
So I guess, it's to get them used to the idea of having to pay us higher taxes.
Well, I think this was also taken before you with multiple packages. You will have another hearing for another area that will be coming forward. So some of these were before you in October, and then will be in November as well. So it was a staggered approach, so we could bring them forward to you with a method and have good discussion.
Do we have a timeline on when this next fire station is expected to be completed?
Yes, we do. Less than 2 years from today.
Okay, and I'm glad you came up, Chief, thank you. Because here's another question I had. I know we've talked about this relay, and someone had said that their property was 2,300 feet from the nearest hydrant. And so you talked about 750 feet of hose. So that would be 3 trucks wouldn't quite make it. And so I'm concerned about that. But also, how long does it take to get 3 trucks in those positions?
I can't answer that question specifically. We just did a department-wide training just last year, so everyone would be familiar with it, know how to do it, and to be able to do it. But as far as giving you an exact time frame, I can't give you that.
Well, can you tell me how fast water flows out of a fire hydrant?
No, I can't.
I'm just wondering so I'm thinking LFR gets there in maybe 5 minutes. And then they're hooking these trucks up, and that's got to take a few minutes at least. And then how long does it take for water to fill the hose? Because that's another few minutes. Mm-hmm. And now we've got a raging fire.
Maybe the best way to answer that question is with an example. And I don't have the paper in front of me. One of the residents had the article from the fire on Piper Way.
Okay.
And the house was ultimately destroyed. When we were dispatched to that fire, I talked to the incident commander about that fire, who came from 18th and Q. When he left the building, so approximately 60 seconds after dispatch to us, he requested mutual aid resources from Southeast Rural. And so the entire time, as soon as they could get to the location from wherever they live in the area, because it was at night, so they have to go to the station, get their equipment, and then respond. So we worked together from the very beginning, within 60 seconds of the beginning, and unfortunately that was the outcome. The house was totally destroyed.
Well, but I think the article was about no fire hydrants.
Well, it was, but the point is I'm trying to make is we worked with Southeast Rural from almost the very beginning on that incident, and that was the outcome. So had we not worked with Southeast Rural, had they been there alone, it had the same outcome.
So I did this, and forgive me for taking a few extra minutes, but I forgot to ask this earlier. You talked about tinder trucks that actually carry, 5,000 to 7,000 gallons of water?
Depends, but some of them carry those.
Does LFR have any of those?
We do not.
Okay, and so, but we do have some trucks that carry water?
All of our fire engines carry 500 gallons.
Okay, thank you.
Larry and then John.
Got questions for each of you. And I appreciated Cindy's because Mr. Wolfram had asked about why now, the annexation. Mr. Howe brought up the issue, as many have, about adequate fire protection. So can you review for us again why you feel there is adequate fire protection, where you see any gaps in fire protection?
Well, I think it's adequate because they have exactly what they have today in addition to us. Or vice versa. It's like the point that Mr. Shobe made. You don't have to choose between one or the other. You can get both. And again, I think that the sum of both of us is better than just one of us.
Okay. And then Mr. Schweddy asked about, Schutte, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong, asked about the costs for services and whether or not, they're entitled to water and sewer if they request, but they don't get any information about the cost of those kinds of infrastructure services until they do that. Can you provide any sense of what that cost would be? And then let's just say they asked for it upon this annexation, if this proposed annexation passes, the earliest time frame for that being implemented, were they to request it immediately? Just to get a sense of earliest timing possible and basic rough estimate of cost.
Yeah, so first I'll address why we're not giving those detailed engineering estimates right now. Because annexation is separate from requesting water, sewer, or even urban roads. They could be annexed, it could be 10 years before they request water or sewer. So it doesn't really make sense to spend a lot of resources doing a detailed engineering study on that for something they may not even ask for a decade.
But you can understand why they would want to know.
Yeah, and I understand why they want to know. And so at the neighborhood meeting, we did share with them some estimated costs. So if you look at water pipe and sewer pipe, based on recent projects, we can roughly say it's about $80 a foot for that pipe. So you imagine properties on both sides. So for each property, it's about $40 a foot for water, and then $40 a foot for sewer. It's obviously very rough, but that's, you can use that as a general guideline for cost. In terms of timing, I don't exactly know the time frame. We may want to get is Bob here?
I think Bob Simmering from Public Works is
There
here
he
to
is.
answer some more details about assessment districts.
Thanks for waiting all this time, Bob, to be called upon.
Pleasure. I've never heard this before.
Again, the question really is, were this to pass, were there to be an immediate request for water and sewer, what kind of rough timeline at a minimum would we be talking about for getting that in place?
One of the benefits we have is our sewer and water lines butted to these properties, so there wouldn't be any lines extended just to get there. There would be a design process which, could take, I would just estimate 90 to 120 days to do a design on that, get approvals for it, and then there'd be the construction period. So it would not be unreasonable to think it could be done in a single construction season. And that would very much depend on how much was being installed. This could be done in sections rather than the entire project. One of the commenters had said something about somebody in the middle requesting a service, and that could happen. There could be a partial line installed, then another line installed at a different time to finish out the subdivision. So that would obviously have some impact on the construction season that it happened in.
So, okay. Do you have just a range of time frame that you could imagine this could take if it was requested immediately and everybody wanted it?
If we could start the planning in the winter season, I believe it could be done in the summer of that same year.
Okay, thank you. And then the last question I wanted to ask had to do with an issue raised by Mr. Henna, and it's kind of one of the interesting issues about annexation in this kind of city-initiated case, and it's really for perhaps planning. It's about cost-benefit, and it's clear that there's not very much property tax revenue coming to the city from any of the proposals that are before the council. That's not clearly the driver for any of this. To what extent should the council be taking into consideration the costs that are incurred by bringing in these properties, whether it's for road maintenance, whether it's for additional fire service? What is your response to this cost-benefit argument?
I think that I would respond to that in terms of what David Carey had discussed earlier, in terms of the size of this annexation package versus our annual growth rate that we experience developer-driven. And the impact here is 128 homes amongst the 8 sub-areas. We have nearly 1,300 dwelling units a year being built naturally. We are aware that there's going to be additional cost of this, and we have talked with Public Works. We looked at the roads. The roads that are in these sub-areas are in fairly good condition. They do need maintenance. That will be a cost. That will be rolled over into the traditional maintenance of all of the other city roads. As far as hiring additional personnel for fire and police, this number of homes, this number of areas didn't rise to the level where we needed to have that kind of a budget discussion. So in terms of the impacts, yes, there are going to be some additional costs, but to look at hiring additional personnel that cover this service and make sure that they have safe response times, that didn't rise to that level.
I would just, a little piece of information just to put that in context of what Paul just said about the size of these proposed areas for annexation, is that over the last 17 years, the city has annexed over 20 square miles, almost all of which was based on the growth that's happening on the edges. And so there is a balancing factor there that I think we just need to keep in mind when we talk about these areas, that our regular annexations with growth on the edges far outpaces what we're talking about in these limited and focused annexation proposals.
Thank you.
Okay, other questions? Carl?
Yes, thank you.
Forgot me.
Oh, sorry.
I got to remember my question.
Mr. Bohr, Chief Bohr, former volunteer firefighter, okay, and in that capacity was in Palmyra. And so when we had a fire, we called Unadilla and Syracuse and Eagle and Bennett, and everybody came and helped each other out. And the number one issue we had with, undoubtedly, was what we heard about the grass fires. Mm-hmm. So if a grass fire were to happen now, within the city limits of Lincoln, what would you do?
Oftentimes we call our mutual aid partners. They have great equipment to handle that kind of an incident. We don't. We have one that it's not the best suited. It's older, very old. So when we have a fire in the city limits today, we call our mutual aid partners.
So it works the same way in Lincoln as it does in Palmyra, Nebraska. Another question we heard was the no burn policy within the city limits. Can you explain that for us?
Yeah, there's actually 2 codes that the city relies on. The first one is the fire code, in which typically don't issue burn permits for safety reasons, but we do allow burn pits. So a burn permit is allowed under certain size, certain size and shapes, and et cetera. The other code that we rely on is the health code. The health code itself really prohibits open burning because of the detrimental impact on the health of the neighbors or the people around you. We experience every spring Kansas burning the fires there, and the impact it has on us here. So even when you have a legal burn pit in the city of Lincoln, if the smoke from that is impacting your neighbor, even though it's legal in size and shape and all of the other criteria, they have to extinguish it because it's impacting the health of their neighbor. So those are the two codes we rely on to determine what can be done and what can't be done. But typically, we don't issue open burn permits inside the city of Lincoln.
Thank you.
Okay, John.
Thank you. A couple of reflections here. We talk about the growth of the city, and that's true, that's occurring, but we're also, as you know, encouraging a lot of density. We're getting a lot of high-rise structures within the city, so it's not just a matter of so much land mass anymore. But at the same time, we do need to make developable land available. Chief Boer, you were saying that currently on this particular section, they can get both now, both the rural and the city.
Mm-hmm.
So 2 for the price of 1, I think you said. So why rush the annexation if they can get the same now that they get after annexation?
I don't really know. All this annexation discussion has really generated a discussion between the chief of Southeast Rural and Lincoln about an automatic aid agreement where they truly get the benefit of both agencies. I think had these annexation discussions not taken place, we wouldn't have started to begin the conversations with Southeast Rural to have that true both agency benefit.
Okay. Well, I know we pushed too to try to, like the Southeast Rural Fire Station there is going to be near where our news station is, and we tried to get some of those lands to cooperate. Same thing down on Highway 2. So
John, I could probably even add to that answer because I think the question about annexation is beyond just the fire response. I think that's one of the issues that certainly has come up. So there are a lot of other reasons that we have, as we walk through this and this evening and in other hearings, that there are other reasons to do the annexation package. So it's not just dependent on the fire and rescue topic, although that has been obviously come to the fore. So I just want to make that clear as well.
And I realize that there are all the different departments. You know, we hear about Mr. Barnes is talking about the taxes, they're not payable till 2019, but they are a liability come January 1st or 2018. It's just they're paid in arrears. And with this group before us talking about being told December, I guess as I think of my time clock, basically they wouldn't meet the January 1 deadline, so you'd be looking a year later that all this would come into being, because it's determined on January 1 of each year whether you're in this district or that district. So, and as a couple of my colleagues have said too, I don't know about, we're getting that much benefit versus the cost we're going to expend, but just stepping back, hearing all this, hearing certain things about different dates and communication from city staff, hearing what you gentlemen are saying and others, it seems like we're just rushing a little bit here and we don't have all the answers. I look here at the response here. If we had to do the relay, the daisy chain, one of the testifiers said, looking at current fire stations, not the new one that'll be done in 2 years, but Station 9 to get there would take 8 minutes, Station 12, 8 minutes, Station 5, 12 minutes. So I think in response to what my colleague, Ms. Lamb, was saying, maybe you got to wait till the last one gets there 12 minutes because you got to have all the hose hooked up. And then you turn on the spigot and, a lot happens. We talk about the immediacy of response. And so I'm just concerned that we need to be prepared to meet the commitments or what these folks are saying, and again, I'm not trying to just dwell on fire, but that's come up a lot here. If they've got the benefit of both now, on that, I worry though more about the police protection, extending that, the miles driven by our police officers, and we have challenged there, adding staff, and there's just a whole host of the factors of the city, and then getting the homeowners to agree maybe to some taxing districts that they have to install certain utilities. That takes time, so I don't know that even though, if you had all that done, then maybe one construction season, but you've got some time frame here, and I don't feel like, from my perspective, that the timeline is really laid out in a methodical way. It's just like, let's hurry up and get it done before December so we can get them on the tax rolls January 1.
So if I could, part of my answer to that is a little bit about what I was going to start off with a rebuttal as well, as the part of tonight. But I would want to say that one of the points that we have made, and what I would like to reiterate at this point, is that this area and other areas that we are proposing in this package overall are in areas that to be served by response time, fire and rescue, police, are closer in to the stations than other areas that have already been annexed and developed further beyond. So we have already as a city made a decision that we are willing to live with that service. And I would say, going through this process, I'm confident that that level of service is very high. I trust our firefighters and police officers, but I think it's very, very important to point that out because we have brought in areas that are beyond these areas that we're talking about. And so, a little bit back to, I think we all have had a little bit of that question and discussion now, that it is a good discussion to have, but the point is that, we do fall back on the equity part of this, which is we have areas that are nearly surrounded by the city, using city services, mainly in streets, but other services as well, and the benefits of living in our city. And that really is the heart of this proposal, to bring forward a package that makes the most sense. And we've identified other areas that we did not bring forward, directly north of this area that we're talking about today, because it doesn't quite meet all of those, doesn't check all the boxes. It will eventually, but not today. But these areas that we're bringing forward are very much in that area of feeling comfortable with being able to have part of our city and serve it well. And that is, I just want to make sure I got that point in, because you brought up those points, and that is a direct response to some of those questions that you do have.
Okay. Very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next item, please.
All right, next is item 13, approving a real estate sales agreement between the city and Blue Ridge Unlimited LLC for the sale of city-owned property generally located at 7701 Gray Cliff.
Is anybody going to speak about this?
I'm,
Yeah.
again, Pat Boer, Lincoln Fire. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Oh, yeah, please go get.
I think Jeff did, yeah.
Okay.
Maybe just a little bit of, while we're waiting for, there she is. I'm looking at the fact sheet that was produced by the Urban Development Department. This property was deeded to the City of Lincoln in 2003 by LES, in a time when we didn't have a good matrices to determine where stations should be located. We thought it might be a suitable property, but as over the years since 2003, as the city's grown and land has been developed, looking at it today and looking at the proposed growth of the City of Lincoln, it's not in the right spot for us. So we'd like to sell it and use the proceeds to buy land in the right area.
Okay. Questions? John?
Yeah. And Chief Bauer, this would go in with the land acquisition fund designated for the fire acquisition, but it would not have anything to do with the current fire stations.
That's correct. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Okay. Other questions? Thank you.
Well, I just want
Oh, go ahead.
We voted on this June 12th, not this, the same topic. We were surplusing the property, and there was a motion to amend that we all approved, and it was about designating those funds for fire station construction and acquisition, but I'm not sure. Was that actually for the fire station land acquisition fund?
Yes, that was, and I think
Yeah.
Jeff Kirkpatrick, City Attorney, since this sale will go through prior to all of the property being acquired for the new stations, that money will therefore be present in the land acquisition fund and can be used for one of the new stations to acquire the real estate.
Right.
Had
Okay.
it been,
and that was the point.
Had we
of it, was
already
to
acquired
potentially-
all of the property
Yeah.
before this was sold, then we wouldn't have been able to. But because of the timing, because we haven't acquired all of the locations yet, I think it can be.
So it does help, that motion that we passed, that it does help us potentially get those stations done slightly faster. We don't have to rely on the sales tax collection to get that 128,000, correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
John?
Mr. Patrick, if you would double check that and let us know afterwards, some of my recollection on that is that it wouldn't, but let's just,
Well,
if you're absolutely sure, then
it does go into the land acquisition fund, as the sale of city properties always do, and we always try to credit that back to the department that contributed the real estate. And so from that standpoint, I would expect it would for any future land acquisition. And my understanding is we still have not acquired all of the locations for the 4 fire stations under the city sales tax. And as well, as you recall, that was voted on by the city council, that specifically, as the councilwoman had indicated, that any land that was sold during this period, if possible, would be going toward the acquisition of future sites. So I think the question is, would any land from the fire department be sold during this period so that it could go into the fund and so that it could be used to acquire new real estate for those sites?
my only question is, for future sites, I had thought that the sales tax and everything was going to cover these 4 sites. So, but
maybe I can speak. I'm not going to contradict Jeff, but we have 1 site left to acquire for the 4 new stations. It's what we call Station 16. We have a line item in our budget. Director Cassidy and others have placed an approximate figure for the purchase of that property. It's not our intent to tap into the land acquisition fund for the purchase of that property, but whether it's available or not, I don't know. I'm not going to contradict Jeff.
well, that would help us because we're about the same amount over on acquisition. So that's
Well,
good. That'd be good to know.
And you would know better than I, but my sense is that because we're acquiring sites that are more expensive than this, it's not like we can sell this and pay for 1 site, but it would help to decrease the cost.
Yeah, well, that'd be good news.
There's already plenty of money in the land acquisition fund that could be used for this purpose, correct?
Well, there is some, but we try to match it up with where the
There's no
property
absolute
came
ordinance
from.
requirement that happened.
Right, but, it just depends on how much was sold from the fire department as opposed to the library department or whatever. We would try to match up where it comes from. Urban development sells property, it goes into their site acquisition to the extent we can, but as you point out, that's something that we try to do, but we don't always do it that way.
Which is why I proposed the motion back in June, was to try and make sure that, given our big efforts citywide to get these stations, land acquired for these stations, that we, in fact, make sure it happens in this case.
Exactly.
Okay.
That's good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Would anyone else like to testify on this item? Next item, please.
All right, next is our public hearing ordinance 3rd reading. Item 14, change of zone 17011, application of Roger Schwissow Revocable Trust for a change from AG Agricultural to R3 Residential on property generally located at North 49th and Alvo Road.
Hi, Roger Schwiesel, 1354 Pelican Bay Place. And unlike the people before me, I'm trying to get annexed, but what we've done, trying to address some of the problems we've had out there, we've regraded Kevin's backyard to get drainage, and it's been resodded and seeded around the area. We've put a small swale in by Lynn and Pat's house to try to get the water to go underneath the fence. It'll have to be widened out, but we did pull the mulch back out of the plantings, even though we're on a neighbor's ground. I hope, there's nobody living there, so I hope they don't care, but I think Lynn and Pat had put the stuff in there, so it wasn't them, so. And we received our permit last week to install the drainage for the sump pumps, and so we have installed everything along Alvo Road already from 49th Street to the drainage ditch, except for where we have to bore underneath 51st Street, and that'll be done tomorrow. So, and we've also potholed along 50th Street and found the gas mains and that to try to get a line in there, so.
Okay. Any questions? Thank you, sir.
Can I just, thank you. I want to thank you for meeting and offering to meet with a number of us and for taking care of some things you're taking care of. And I understand that when we spoke, you were looking at running that pipe down to the storm drain. And I wasn't clear on what you just told us, what exactly where that is right now.
Okay, the one we've got installed runs on the north side of Alvo Road from 49th Street all the way to where the box culvert goes underneath Alvo Road.
Okay.
We anticipate possibly having some water problems there with the townhomes that was in the second edition. And so we're just trying to be proactive so we don't have the same problem again. It's so much easier to put it in before the utilities are all run to the houses than it would be afterwards.
And what about in the phase one where the water was pooling? That's where the drain is going to go to the storm sewer, correct? And where are you on that?
We've got it potholed, trying to find the gas lines, and we'll be trying to address that here this next week.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, other questions? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Would anyone else like to testify on this item?
Good evening. Lyle Loth, 601 Old Cheney Road, Re-Engineering Group on behalf of Roger and Eldana Suizo. Just like to update you a little bit on the status of the administrative amendment. We applied for that on October 11th. We received a response from Jared Nelson, Watershed Management, on October 24th, last Tuesday. I met with Jared, Ben Higgins, Steve Henriksen, and Donna Garden on Friday to go over the 17 points that Jared had raised in his response. We had a really good meeting, I think, on last Friday. And when we left that meeting, I think we were all of a general consensus that we knew exactly what it was that we were going to do to address these situations. So it's just a matter now of dotting the I's and crossing the T's and actually getting this in place. I just wanted to remind you folks that Roger realizes that he cannot do any final platting until this administrative amendment is approved. So he will be proceeding with that as quickly as we can. But I would like to see if you could not go ahead and take action on the change of zone and rely on your staff to see that the administrative amendment does answer all those drainage concerns and so on. So there will be no more platting until that happens. So I don't think there's any risk to proceed with the action on the change of zone tonight.
Okay, questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Would anyone else like to testify?
Good evening. I'm Kevin Nelson, and I live at 7310 North 50th Street. I just kind of wanted to give you a little bit of an update on what's going on out in North Bank Preserve since this process has begun. I'd like to lead off by thanking Mickey at the Planning Department. Her and several members of her staff came out several weeks ago, met with a lot of our property owners, and Mickey did a fantastic job of facilitating those discussions and helping to get us some resolution and some answers, and so I appreciate Mickey for doing that. Shortly after that meeting took place then, Roger and I started meeting, and we came to an agreement on what needed to be done to help to address some of the drainage problems in my backyard. We came to a cost-sharing plan between Roger and myself, and that plan has been carried out. We're now waiting for the first rain to happen to see if this plan is going to work. But some of the concerns that's been brought up throughout this process, as we did the excavation of the ground, we started noticing water still filling across from the adjacent property owner. As we did more and more work trying to figure out what was going on, what we found out was that 2 sprinkler heads of mine were buried under a foot of dirt, over a foot of dirt. Now, where did that dirt come from? It was right along the property line of myself and the adjacent homeowner who built after I built my house. And as we've talked about before, the issue that's going on out there, we have a bad contractor. And that contractor, as Roger has said repeatedly, does not haul off dirt like they're required to do. And so what they do is they build that house up on a hump. Well, in this particular instance, that hump ended up spilling over onto my property line and buried a sprinkler, 2 sprinkler heads, and over a foot of dirt. And the sprinkler expert came out and said, this is probably 98% of your problem. And I don't even know if that back excavating actually needed to be done. Because what was going on is both of these sprinkler heads were dumping water into my basement at the rate of 2 gallons a minute. So this is a bad contractor that's going on out there. I did had Building and Safety. They finally came out last Friday to take a look and finally started really doing some deep research of what's going on. And what I was told last Friday was the house next to me, even though it's been built and completed and occupied for almost 3 years now, never has had an occupancy permit issued. It did not get it. It's not at least in the computer system as of Friday. That is a concern to me, that we have property that did not get an occupancy permit. And I think that needs to be addressed. You know, what's going on or why this kind of stuff isn't getting done. And I don't know if that's, I don't believe that's Roger's fault. I don't believe that's the owners of North Bank Preserve. I think it's an issue between Building and Safety and the contractor. And one of the things I found out in the discussion that I had with Building and Safety is in the city of Lincoln, we have no requirements for licensing contractors. We require electricians, we require plumbers, but we don't require contractors to be licensed. They do in Omaha. And maybe that's something we need to look at in the city of Lincoln. And so I would encourage all of you as members of our city council to look at that issue and determine if that is a feasible solution to some of the problems that we've had out at North Bank Preserve. I'd like to thank each of you for all of your time and on this and trying to get to resolution for us. We do appreciate your work, and thank you.
Questions? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Next testifier.
Hi, my name is Dawn Voldenau, 5010 Becky's Way Road. I guess I still have my issue hasn't really been addressed currently. Roger did come out and talk to us today, or to me, with a solution of putting a swell in. However, he did mention that he would like to do that swell till that lot sells. That lot has been vacant for over 2 years, and I don't like the idea because to me, you can see this is a safety issue, and if anybody would get hurt, I could be sued, and the city could be sued because you guys all know about it. I'm asking you guys to delay the zoning till this issue gets resolved. I don't want anybody to get hurt. I want you guys to be proactive. We've had suggested many issues or many concerns. You guys have known about this for 2 years with a different zoning. And to me, this is still a safety hazard. That's my biggest concern. I don't want anybody to get hurt. Roger has, like I said, contacted us today. It took him several months to do that, but at least I knew he was working on other neighbors' issues, and I was patiently waiting, so I'm thankful that Roger has attempted to talk to us now. But I guess we need to know how the city wants to solve this. What are our options and stuff like that, because it's uncalled for. I guess that I don't know what else to say, but it needs to be resolved. And I think there is a cable line that still hasn't been buried. Over a year ago, they installed a new cable system out there, and I think that line is still above ground, which lawnmowers have been hitting. So it doesn't mean it has to be electrical issue. It could be also spark from somebody doing cable or water hitting the cable line. And if that's the case, I don't want to be liable for anybody getting hurt out there. I don't know if I could live with myself with that. That's all I have to say, and thank you for all your guys' time and effort in helping us resolve this. Thank you for the city and building and everybody else to listen and to help us to get through this.
Cindy?
Do you have any idea who installed the cable that's still above ground?
I think it could be Spectrum.
Oh, but you don't know, for
I
sure?
don't know for sure.
Okay. Thank you, Dawn. Thanks for being here and for your patience. I know that you are still feeling vulnerable at this point, and I am, like you, I'm encouraged by the steps that Roger's taken and the work that he's done around. And I got to tell you that I believe that he's moving forward in good faith and that this issue is going to be resolved. So I appreciate you, though, bringing this back up to us, because I know we've asked a lot of questions and to make sure if was there a hazard, electrical hazard, and evidently the boxes are rated so that there shouldn't be any harm to anyone despite the water when it arrives there. But I feel confident that Mr. Schweitzer is going to make sure that that gets taken care of at some point. So,
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to testify on this item? Short rebuttal, please.
Roger Schweitzel. The cable is actually Windstream. Time Warner or Spectrum was putting a new line and hit Windstream's cable. I've called them. It's been laying there almost 2 years. I've called them I don't know how many times, and all they tell me is we've got them laying all over like that, and that's the response I get. As far as, trying to drain the water there in Dawn's house, I did talk to her today, and what I'd asked her is if she could hold off until we build the house beside her, because it would be so much easier. We're going to have to tear up all her lawn and her sprinkler system on that side of the house. And if we could have that extra room to work while we're building, we can get the swale between the two houses where it should be, which would, and then we can get the water drained out. So, and that's what I, was proposing to do. And we won't delay, the house is going to be built within this next summer, or would do it anyway.
That was my question. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Next item, please.
That concludes our public hearing. We can move into the voting
Wait a
session.
minute. Apparently, there's a staff question.
Okay.
David Carey with the Planning Department.
Dave, could you give us an update on the administrative amendment and where it's at?
Sure. Really, a lot of what Lyle just reported on is where we're at. There has been progress made on all those items that do need to be finally addressed. And we have the agreement that the final plat would not move forward until that administrative amendment is in place and agreed to. So it's not at a point where it can be approved at this point in time, but it will be very soon is our expectation. We will continue to work on that. As far as what it's addressing pretty much what Public Works watershed management folks have identified as being either concerns or some minor items that need to be finalized and put in place so that we know that we're dealing with all the issues that are out there in this area for the change of zone.
So when do you think the administrative amendment will be agreed upon?
Timing of that, I might ask Jared Nelson, who I believe is still here. Might as well use his time since he's been here for the entire evening. I think he would give you a better estimation on the timing of when we think that will be done.
Jared Nelson with Public Works and Watershed Management. I can't fully answer that question. We met with Lyle on Friday and went over the comments. I reviewed the plans and we provided comments to Lyle. And we went over that on Friday and discussed them. And we like Lyle said, I agree with that we have an understanding of where it needs to go to move forward. Now the ball's in Lyle's court, the engineer, and it'll be up to him and his staff to put the plans together. Typically these types of things, they turn these plans around, and it could be several weeks, it could be a week, it could be a day. It wouldn't be very long, I don't think, unless they sat on it. And then once they give it back to us, we have 10 days to review it.
Okay. Question as well.
Lorraine?
My question's actually for Chad Blaha, since I saw he's here too.
Blaha Building and Safety.
Thanks for being here tonight. I know you saw the picture that Ms. Fuldenaw put up of the electrical boxes in the water. Is that something that your department typically addresses? If so, are there any city codes that could be utilized to address her concern, maybe prior to next summer, which sounds like is the rough timeline for the house to be built on the adjacent lot?
In terms of that one, we generally, in the building code that we enforce, generally have grading requirements that address away from foundation. That's what our building code sections that deal with drainage focus on, making sure that water tries to get away from foundations. And in terms of finding a way off of the property, if our inspectors see a big problem, they will try and talk to the builder about, putting in a swale or getting water out of the backyard. I don't know much about that. It looked very flat, and it looked like the fix, may have involved more than just swales, and they may not have even noticed it when they were out there doing the inspection itself. Now, did you ask what could be done?
Yeah, electrical code. I don't know what
the electrical code.
What could you draw upon from your portfolio of codes and services that might be able to assist her, if anything, that you can think of at a glance?
The electrical code for us stops at the meter. It's inside the house, meter
Nothing
into the
outside.
house, nothing outside. That is all, once it leaves the meter towards that transformer or the pedestal, that's all LES. That is not, then the electrical code does not govern anything outside the meter.
Do you have any thoughts on whether or not LES could be of assistance in this matter? Is she?
I don't right now. We certainly are. I mean, we have a good working relationship with LES, and I can certainly ask our chief electrical inspector to engage in to see what collaboration between the two, between city code and LES regulations could be done. We're not involved with the setting of the pedestals or the setting of those concrete pads for the transformers.
Well, if there's any potential for something like that to be of assistance, perhaps that could, if you could make that contact and help out.
Sure.
That would be nice.
Okay. Anything else? Next item, please.
All right, that concludes our public hearing. We can move into the voting session. Public hearing resolutions. Item 9 is the report of new and pending claims against the city for the period of October 1st through the 15th, introduced by Eskridge.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Carl, seconded by Jane. Discussion.
We do have a motion to amend number 1 to remove the claim of Tara Merquan from the list of denied claims, if someone wished to move
I'd
that.
so move.
Second.
Moved by John, seconded by Cindy. Are there other claims we want to remove? Now's the time?
Well, I guess we had some discussion about the trees and the fallen branches, and I don't know if there was some interest in delaying them, but I thought that at the very least it would make sense to remove the claim, and I would move that we consider that removing the claim.
We should.
Three tree claims. Do you want to move all of them?
Well, we should vote on the first motion to amend.
Yeah.
And then.
You want to vote on that first?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.
Okay,
Well,
so before we have a discussion, we have to have a motion.
I'll make a
So,
motion.
you can remove all of them?
No.
Or just,
I'm going to move that we remove the claim from Ms. Ramju because the city was on notice that that tree needed trimming. And then before the city got out to trim that tree, a branch fell on her vehicle. To me, that sounds like a justification for actually, I would say, I'm not removing this claim. I think we should pay this claim.
Second.
okay, so you're moving to pay this claim?
Well, every time we've heard about these kinds of issues, yeah.
I'm
yeah,
just clarifying
yes.
on the
Yeah,
motion.
I'm-
You're
yeah.
moving to pay this claim.
This is the first time I've heard our city attorney tell us that the city had notice, had not yet performed the service needed, i.e. trimming in this case, and then a fallen branch, whether a fallen branch.
We've
hit the
got a
car.
motion and a second, moved by Larry and seconded by Jane. Discussion now.
Just for everyone's reference, the first motion to amend just removed it from denied. It did not put it to approve. So it's just
Yeah.
postponed to a later meeting, so.
Okay, so this is moving to approve Mrs. Ramju's claim.
Correct.
Cindy?
So I would rather remove all those tree claims until we hear from forestry, which is one of the things we talked about before I make a decision on whether to pay this particular claim. I'm just more comfortable with that, and I would like to talk.
I see a lot of nodding heads. Would you like to withdraw that motion and go ahead and remove all these pending?
I'll withdraw the motion, absolutely, if you'd rather take them up altogether. I just thought that this one was
Was a
distinct
slam
from the others, but
Okay, so-
if you want to take them up.
And I would second Cindy's motion.
Okay, so Cindy has moved that all of these three tree claims be removed from this resolution, pending hearing testimony from a city arborist.
Correct.
It's seconded by John.
No.
No, by Carl.
Carl, excuse me. Yeah,
The other
that guy over there.
It's getting
Okay.
late.
Yeah. Okay, seconded by Carl. So is there discussion on this?
And I would just like to say as part of discussion that I do think that very well may be distinct, but I would like to hear all of it and then make that determination. So I appreciate that motion. Thank you.
Okay. Please call the roll.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.
Now
On
the
the
whole
main motion.
Oh,
motion.
that's right, now we're on the main motion. Let's go.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Public hearing ordinances second reading are items 10 through 13. Public hearing ordinance third reading, item 14 is change of zone 17011. This was Roger Schwissow at North 49th and Alvo Road, introduced by Raybold.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Jane, seconded by Carl. Are we going to talk about this one?
No, we're not.
Okay. Call the roll, please.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Thank you. Ordinances third reading, item 15, change of zone 17022. Application of Lux Center for the Arts to designate the former University Place City Hall as landmark at 2601 North 48th Street, introduced by Camp.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by John, seconded by Carl. Discussion? Please call the roll.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Item 16, change of zone 17024. Application of John and Terry Thomas to designate the Burgess House as a landmark at 6501 Southwest 40th Street, introduced by Camp.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by John, seconded by Carl. Discussion? Please call the roll.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Item 17 is change of zone 17026, application of Magnum Properties for a change from H3 Highway Commercial to I-1 Industrial at 235 South Coddington, introduced by Camp.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by John, seconded by Carl. Discussion? Please call the roll.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Item 18, change of zone 17027, application of Hepburn Properties for a change from P Public Use to H3 Highway Commercial on property at 200 Northwest 84th Street, introduced by Camp.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by John, seconded by Carl. Discussion? Please call the roll.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp? Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Item 19 is annexation 17013, annexing approximately 4 acres at 84th and Pioneers, introduced by Camp.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by John, seconded by Carl. Discussion. Please call the roll.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. Item 20, annexation 17011, annexing approximately 161 acres at South 40th and Yankee Hill, introduced by Camp.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. No, moved by John, seconded by Carl. Discussion.
Yes.
John.
I'm going to vote against this. I just think the timing is not right, and I'd like to see this maybe in the 2020 round or something, but it's just premature at this time for the one residence, and you're looking at a golf course.
Okay, further discussion? Cindy.
I just want to say that I agree with Councilman Camp. I was especially struck by the fact that the man believes that if we annex, he's not going to be able to grow any legal crop.
Okay.
Grow what?
Legal crops.
But more importantly, I do think it's a timing issue.
I'm worried about the corn stalks, too.
Yeah.
Plenty of corn, John.
Okay. Lyria?
Yes, no, he told you, no, I'm good, because I'm going to organize my thoughts while you're talking.
Well, I mean, annexations are complicated animals, and it's been something that we've all had to give a lot of thought to. And in this case, this site was originally proposed for annexation in 2008, and the decision was to not go forward at that time. So here we are 9 years later. And one of the recommendations that the property owner can pursue to try and mitigate the impacts is to pursue a conservation easement. That's something that was discussed 9 years ago and could still be assisted in achieving with assistance from the planning department. You know, the Planning Commission voted unanimously to support this one, and if you want to talk about urban character, I mean, everything around this is developed either as a golf course or homes, and it's so it seems somewhat straightforward relative to a lot of these, and I'm going to support it.
Anyone else? Benny?
Yeah, I just want to say that I did speak with a resident after our meeting last week, and his property makes me feel nostalgic for growing up on a farm, and he's running a rural farm in an urban area. And this doesn't preclude him from continuing to farm. And I wish him success, but I think it does make all the characteristics of a city encouraged annexation. It's urban character, it's surrounded by other city pieces, the equity issue. They're the 3 points I think are covered well.
Okay. Other comments? Please call the roll.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
No.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
No.
Christensen?
No.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Motion carried, 4-3. Item 21, annexation 17012, annexing approximately 32 acres at Southwest First and West Denton Road, introduced by Camp.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by John, seconded by Carl. Discussion.
Seconded by other John.
Okay. Yeah. Please call the roll.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
No.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Motion carried, 6-1. Item 22, text amendment 17016, amending chapter 27.63 of the Lincoln Municipal Code relating to special permits, introduced by Camp.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by John, seconded by Carl. Discussion. Please call the roll.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. Item 23 is special permit 2004A as in Apple, application of Alpha Brewing Operations to amend special permit 2004 to reduce the required parking ratio for assembly facilities from 1 stall per 300 square feet to 1 stall per 1,000 square feet at North 56th and Alvo Road, introduced by Camp.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by John, seconded by Carl. Discussion. Please call the roll.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen.
Yes.
Eskridge.
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. Our resolutions on first reading are items 24 through 28. Ordinances first reading are items 29 through 35. Our pending list date certain, item 36, will come off for next week. Our regular pending list are items 37 through 40. Anyone wishing to address the council on a matter not on this agenda and not planned to appear on a future agenda may do so at this time, since it is an open microphone night.
Anyone like to talk, please come forward.
Mr. Chair, seeing nobody galloping this way, I'd move for adjournment and hope everyone has a safe Halloween.
Moved by John, seconded by Jane. Please call the roll.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0.
We are adjourned.
8:50.